Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of What If Kid Naruto's mind was broken by villagers. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto Uzumaki hated the looks of scorn he received every day. He could practically feel the hate as they glared at him as he went about his day. Those that didn't glare at him ignored him completely as if his existence was something they wished they could ignore. He had one more year at the academy at the age of 11. Though it wasn't meant to be, he had hoped to make friends in the academy. He wasn't ignored, at least. He wouldn't consider any of the other children to be friends, though some of them weren't too horrible. He was in class with the girl of his dreams, but she hit him more often than she talked to him. Even though Sensei was extremely strict, he occasionally bought him ramen. He loved to eat at Ramen Ichiraku whenever he had the chance because it was the greatest place in the world. He was genuinely treated well by the elderly Tuchi and Ayame. Chan never failed to smile at him. Unfortunately, he didn't have many opportunities to eat there. He felt bad about eating for free because he didn't have much money. He did, however, go as frequently as he could, and occasionally Gigi also gave him treatment. He could feel those irate glares as he was walking back from his day at the academy. He was occasionally concerned that they would go beyond scowling and insulting comments. Once, an inebriated man attempted to attack Naruto one evening, but the man quickly vanished and Naruto was unharmed. Naruto reasoned that having Anbu keep an eye on him would help him limit his antics and, as an added benefit, deal with any violent people. Naruto was unaware that he had been saved multiple times by the Anbu guardians. The Anbu served the Hokage, and regardless of their personal feelings, they would have carried out their mission even if it meant torturing and repeatedly killing Naruto. Many Konoha residents were irritated by this and wanted to attack the demon container. Some had experimented with explosives, poison, or thrown weapons, but the Anbu guardians were an unmatched shield. The young Jinchuriki frequently had no idea that his life was in jeopardy. The demon brat had become so despised by the shinobi and civilians that the majority had given up on causing physical harm. They continued to ruin Naruto's life in spite of that. Stores sold him spoiled food or expensive items. A few even declined to take his business. Soon, the establishments that had previously accepted his business were under pressure to do the same. Everything except Ramen Ichiraku's little ramen stand. Those who detested Naruto were not pleased by this, and business suffered as a result. Nobody made the decision to set up a more long-term resolution for the demon. Loving father and daughter shop owners until well into his final year at the academy. Naruto was contentedly chatting with Ayame and the Tuchi while enjoying a bowl of miso ramen. I almost had Sasuke Teme in our spar. Well, maybe not almost, but next time I'm going to get him, believe it. Why do you dislike him so much? Asked Ayame, laughing. He's a bastard. All the girls are like Sasuke.kun. This and Sasuke.kun. That. I don't see what's so special about him anyway. Tuchi gave Naruto another bowl of freshly made ramen. It's all right, Naruto. We enjoy hearing your stories about the Ninja Academy, the kind man said after Naruto hesitated for a moment. With gratitude, Naruto handed himself another bowl. His pantry was empty, so he hadn't eaten breakfast or lunch. Naruto kept talking until a second man came into the ramen shop. The man had a burn scar across the lower portion of his face and was wearing a chunin vest. He scowled at Naruto, who disregarded him and carried on consuming the god's food. What can I get you, Shinobi-san? Tuchi scowled. Why do you let this wretch eat here? Narrowing his eyes, Tuchi said, Naruto is welcome at any time. If you don't like it, you can leave. Unrelated to the food he was eating, Naruto noticed a warm glow emanating from his stomach. You're a disgrace to Konoha. How can you serve this demon spawn? If you keep doing this, you'll go out of business, or worse. Now Tuchi was furious. There was nothing wrong with the poor boy. The village treated him cruelly, and he hadn't requested to be cursed. Get out now. You aren't welcome in my shop ever again. You're making a mistake, Tuchi. A big mistake. I'll be seeing you, the chunin said with a sly smile. He walked away from the ramen stand. Hey old man, he isn't going to make trouble for you, is he? Said Naruto, who was apprehensive. Tuchi raised his eyebrows. No, Naruto, some people just like to act big. There isn't anything to worry about, just eat your supper. With the few people he cared about by his side, Naruto soon found himself lost in the comfort of a full belly. Although the young Uzumaki had never experienced family life, he assumed this was how it would have felt. Tuchi and Ayame were closing their store 3 days later. They arrived home without any problems, but they were attacked as soon as they entered. Because they were shinobi, The three attackers struck with ruthless efficiency. The scarred Chunin from the other day gave the two a sly smile after they had gagged and tied them. "I told you, old man. You had plenty of warnings." In his gag, Tucci screamed. Pulling out a blade, the Chunin pressed it to Ayame's throat. So was it worth it, ramen man? Was it worth feeding the demon? Tucci felt frightened. His greatest love was for his daughter. Desperation gave him strength, but it was in vain as he fought vainly in his bonds. The blade was slightly pushed down by their captor, drawing blood. Ayame had never been so terrified in her life, and she was crying. "It sure would be a waste to just off her now. Can't we have some fun with her first?" asked one of the other captors. The Chunin shrugged. "Fine, but I'm not touching the demon-loving whore. She might be infected with the fox's taint." It was evident from his companion's lecherous smile that he was unconcerned. Tucci let out a hoarse scream and fought like a crazy person to get away. The Chunin kicked the defenseless ramen chef while laughing. The purpose of the Chunin's kicks was to cause pain without killing the man. He soon became a broken and crippled man after having to witness the rape of his only daughter. The Chunin said when they were finished, "All right, let's kill them, get out of here." They merely cut the throats of their captives and watched them perish. Both Tucci and Ayame accepted death at that time in order to get away from their captors' immorality. Hiruzen, the Sarutobi, was enraged. About Tucci and his daughter, he had heard. It was clear that those who detested Naruto were aiming for them. The village was reminded by the Hokage Tower's murderous intent that he deserved the title Shinobi no Kami. "I want them found and made an example of." They tortured and murdered 2 innocent citizens of the Leaf. A thorough investigation was started after the Sandaime yelled commands. Hiruzen promised that until he identified the culprit, he would have all of the shinobi questioned under Inoichi's guidance. "How can I explain what has happened, Naruto?" His head bowed under the weight of responsibility. Hiruzen sat at his desk and gave orders. How did it get to this point? The village had gone so far in the opposite direction that they had killed a family for simply hanging around with Naruto, despite the Yondaime's desire for him to be seen as a hero. The office was entered by an Anbu. "Hokage. Sama, Naruto has been taken to the hospital." "What happened?" the old Hokage asked, his chest tight with fear. Naruto saw the ramen shop had been closed down. He asked a villager what happened and they told him. "What is his condition?" Sarutobi asked with a groan. "Catatonic. He is completely unresponsive. I'm sure the poor boy is shocked. He must spend time with people he knows. Tell Ruka to cancel class today and go to the hospital. I will go there now." "Hi Hokage. Sama." Naruto was aware of what had happened to Tucci and Ayame. He had discovered that they had met a terrible end as a result of his actions. He had totally withdrawn into himself. He wouldn't confront a world capable of doing this. When the Kyuubi entered Naruto's mindscape, they noticed a change. Even though he was still behind the damned seal, it seemed weaker in some way. To his surprise, one of Kurama's claws went straight through the bars when he pressed it against them. He was free to leave the cage, but the seal remained. Kurama was overjoyed. At last, he might be free. He could wreak havoc on everyone. However, he didn't. Not at least not yet. Despite his many qualities, Kurama was not stupid. Rather, he was wise from his extensive life experience. Through the eyes of the Jinchuriki who had imprisoned him, he had been aware of the world. He had been enslaved by one shinobi using the despised Sharingan. He had been sealed once more by another shinobi. The teacher of that shinobi was still alive and could likely seal him once more. That damn seal could also be used by the current Hokage. No, he would get great pleasure from punishing the village for putting him in prison, but he would soon be put back in a cage if he broke free from his host. However, there is an alternative. In his mindscape, Kurama attempted to communicate with Naruto, but the boy was nowhere to be seen. No answer. The boy appeared to be brain dead. Since there was nobody to stop him, Naruto took control of his body. With Naruto's eyes, he gazed out into the world. He lifted his hand and took control of Naruto's body. "I must avoid using any of my own chakras lest they suspect me. I'll have to learn how to use Naruto's chakra for the time being." He heard a nurse say, "The patient has regained consciousness, bring the doctor in." When the doctor arrived, he made some inquiries. Although Kurama was aware that he would have to pose as Naruto, he declined to be the happy person that Naruto displayed to the world. The loss of 2 of his most valuable people would be the ideal pretext for becoming less foolish and more serious. He gave the doctor a brief and an interesting response to his questions. A few minutes later, the Hokage entered. Kurama had to suppress a savage grin from appearing on his face. How he delighted in the old man's anguished look. Naruto, I'm glad to see you awake. Kurama was careful to mimic Naruto's speech patterns when he asked, Gigi, is it true? Did they hurt them because of me? Hirazen's expression was so precious, such regret and grief. We are still investigating the incident, but I know we will find those responsible. Astute old man, shall we raise the stakes a little? Gigi, I'm scared. What if they go after Iruka? Sensei, are you next? It's all my fault. It would have been better if I was never born. Kurama laughed to himself at Sandame's stunned expression. None of that, Naruto. What happened was a tragedy, but it was not your fault. As for Iruka, he is a shinobi and I am the Hokage. No one will harm us. And I have to start creating a new identity now. Kurama pressed tears into his host's eyes. Even if I was there, all I would have done was get in the way. I'm useless. Hiruzen exhaled. Naruto, you are still young. You aren't useless. I'm sure you will be a great shinobi. Kurama was having fun, but he had to be careful not to overdo it. No, you're wrong. I'm the dead last of the class. I barely understand the things Iruka Sensei talks about. I'm just a burden to you and everyone else. I hope he is not permanently scarred by this village. Please, Kami, let Naruto get over this catastrophe. The Hokage made another attempt. Naruto, I know you feel useless after a tragedy, but you will get past this. You will be a great shinobi and everyone will come to see that in time. I believe it, Naruto, and deep down I know you do too. Kurama rolled his eyes inwardly. He was becoming sick of the Hokage's sentimental shit. He argued with himself about where to go with the discussion. He would have to actually become a shinobi in order to use Naruto's body as his own and learn how to avoid the numerous shinobi who used fuinjutsu that could seal him again. It was a slim chance given his present skill level. He required a catalyst to bring about the change he needed. Gigi, I want to believe, but after today I don't know if I can. Is there some way I could get extra lessons? Just to catch up with the other kids? In his state of guilt, the Hokage was eager to comply with such a request. He looked at the child and replied, Of course, Naruto. I'll make sure you get extra training. I promise I'll do whatever I can to make sure you become a fine shinobi. Kurama believed that hugging the elderly man and crying was preferable to sincerely thanking the rotten jerk. Those words would have undoubtedly lodged in his throat. Iruka came to the scene shortly after. Naruto, I heard you had collapsed. I'm glad you're awake now. Kurama noticed that Iruka resembled one of the numerous villagers he had slain while using Genjutsu. It was intriguing that while many others were unable to see past the hatred for the Kyuubi, the instructor was able to do so. The irony that Iruka was now the idiot and the other villagers were correct made Kurama laugh inwardly. Naruto's once bright cerulean eyes now appeared so lifeless. Iruka wiped away his tears. Naruto already had a difficult time, so why must he now endure this tragedy? It was too gloomy to put into words. With seeming resolve, he raised his head and let his host's eyes harden slightly. Iruka Sensei, Gigi said I'm going to get extra training so I can catch up. I'm not going to let what happened to the old man in Ayame Chan happen to anyone again. I'm going to be a shinobi and protect the whole village. He glanced down and replied, I'll even start paying attention in class. Surprisingly, the nine-tailed fox had listened to the academy's instructions. His only companion in the cage was his own thoughts. It was a blessing to have a window to the outside world. The previous Jinchuriki's seal had muffled all sight and sound, allowing only muffled sound to pass through. He would have to pretend to be ignorant of many things, but for someone with his level of intelligence, this should be easy. In order to speak, Iruka pushed the lump in his throat away and forced a smile. Good Naruto. That's a promise that I think they would have respected. Kurama grew annoyed with Iruka and the Hokage after they stayed with Naruto for a while. Pretending to be a helpless, distraught youngster when he was the most powerful Biju was extremely annoying. But he would put up with it for his freedom. To avoid being imprisoned and confined as he had been for nearly 3 lifetimes, he would do anything. He would become an expert in the shinobi technique known as fuinjutsu and make sure he was never confined again. Kurama had grown accustomed to controlling Naruto's body. He had no trouble managing his own powers because he was a chakra construct, but the boy's chakra control was terrible. He would die in a real battle unless he used his own chakra, in which case he would be sealed once more. He needed to strengthen himself as Naruto, not as the Kyuubi. Before being permitted to go home, he had to spend some time in the hospital under observation. Even though the boy detested his cramped apartment, he would persevere despite it. Though he was acutely aware of the Anbu shadows that followed him everywhere, Kurama had been eager to begin strengthening his host's body. There was some privacy in his house. He was aware that some clans had the ability to see through walls. He did not sense a similar chakra signature among the Anbu outside of his apartment, and there was a girl from that clan in his class. Kurama learned about chakra control techniques and the fundamentals of maintaining a shinobi body from his studies at the academy. He tried the leaf exercise first. He took a leaf and replaced it with paper. It moved slowly. Attempting to utilize someone else's chakra was extremely challenging. To become proficient in Naruto's chakra network would require patience and time. The demon fox had been patient because he had been imprisoned inside his hosts all this time. He had no intention of spending hours sitting there attempting to use pure chakra to manipulate the piece of paper on his forehead. The physical body itself was the second crucial element he was aware of. He required the right diet and exercise. The exercise was simple, and he started using the leaf exercise while performing various calisthenics out of a desire to be more efficient. In addition, he repeatedly lifted his academy textbooks and performed push-ups and sit-ups. Additionally, nutrition would be crucial. Because he had been unfairly imprisoned within his hosts, they had all been blessed with quick healing. Without the right nourishment, Naruto wouldn't perish, but his body would grow more slowly and be weaker than it should have been. This had an obvious solution. Just inform the Hokage that he was out of food and that he was not permitted to buy their food. Kurama did exactly that. He went to the Hokage tower, waited to see his Gigi, and expressed his hunger to him. He sobbed as he told the Hokage how hungry he was and how the ramen stand was the only reason he was able to eat regularly. Every time Kurama saw the Hokage wearing another expression of complete anguish, he couldn't help but laugh. This will never grow old. Naturally, still feeling guilty, Hiruzen took immediate action. He personally escorted Naruto to the grocery store and frightened the proprietors with a volley of murderous threats, threatening to exact revenge if he ever learned that they were overcharging or selling Naruto-tainted food again. When Kurama smelled the urine, he had to hold back his laughter. The Sandame's fury had wet the frightened store owner. Kurama took care not to behave in an uncharacteristic manner. Other than cereal and ramen, Naruto didn't eat much. He was careful not to pick any fruit or vegetables, which caused the Hokage to remark, "I never eat that stuff. It's gross." And so came another lecture about how he needed to feed his body the right foods if he wanted to be a shinobi. In remembrance of poor Tuchi and Ayame, Kurama played the old man like a fiddle and solemnly committed to improving and eating more wholesome meals. Following their shopping excursion, the Hokage declared that his tutor would be waiting for him right away when he returned to the academy the following day. Kurama kept Naruto's expression fixed when they parted ways. He refused to raise any red flags for the Anbu, who were constantly on guard. It was a good beginning. He had started practicing chakra control, improved his diet, and was trying to shape his host's body into that of a true shinobi. The only significant issue he could anticipate was that maintaining his mask while interacting with preteens would be extremely taxing on his patience. "I hope the little brats won't cause too much trouble. It would be pitiful if my plans were derailed because I tore the haughty Uchiha brat's face off." Kurama was on time for the academy. He chose to remain silent and reclusive. He would say that he would rather not have friends until he was strong enough to defend them if Iruka or the Hokage asked him about it. Naruto, of course, had no friends in any case, but he was unable to imagine a conversation in which they would bring up that point. He waited for the class to start after selecting a seat in the back. His teeth were twitched by the rowdy youths around him, but he refrained from letting his internal annoyance manifest itself in his host's physical condition. The rather loud argument between Sakura and Ino over who should sit next to their beloved Sasuke was especially annoying. Kurama detested Sasuke as much as he detested all Sharingan wielders. He had lost his free will and been made into a slave to be used in combat by Madara Uchiha. The worst injustice that the Biju felt he had experienced has persisted to this day. Even the years of incarceration were preferable to losing his will and intelligence. Iruka gave a lecture on the nature of chakra as the class got underway. Since the conversation was intended for children, Kurama was only half listening. Kurama had a pleasant daydream about tearing the raven-haired Uchiha's head off while Iruka was still lecturing. It was unexpected when Iruka called on him. Kurama accurately but incompletely answered the question and echoed what had just been said. "Yes, that's correct, Naruto. Can you tell me why that matters?" Naruto would have uttered the words, "Because it's going to be on a stupid test." It was crucial to avoid deviating too much from Naruto's personality, which those around him knew well. For a while, the passing of his few good friends could be exploited, but an abrupt shift that doesn't show Naruto's true self could raise suspicions. As Iruka frowned and gave the complete and accurate response, the class laughed. Kurama snorted inwardly. Normally, the sensei would have screamed at Naruto, but it seems that he didn't want to agitate the traumatized boy. The Biju pondered absently whether he should poke him until he lectured Naruto, to which Kurama's reaction was to become almost cationic. Iruka's scarred face would be amusingly marred by guilt. Although amusing, it might make training more difficult. After the remainder of the lesson was finished, it was time to go outside for some physical training. Few of them enjoyed spending their entire day in a classroom, so as kids, they were primarily thrilled about this. After completing some easy exercises outside, it was time to practice throwing kunai. Each student's practice scores were graded by the Shinobi Academy. Many kids would be shocked to learn how much information the academy teachers had about them. They were already thinking about which teams and where to best place the students. Although Kurama knew Iruka was documenting results, he was unaware of the scope of the data collection. A number of pupils found it difficult to hit the targets precisely. The majority of these pupils came from non-military households. Kurama witnessed civilian after civilian received lower scores than almost all Shinobi clan scions. The only person to fail that specific exam was Shikamaru Nara, and it was clear to everyone that he had not even attempted. Using Naruto's muscle memory, Kurama threw the first kunai when it was his turn. Not accurate. Although Kurama was immediately aware of the issue, he chose not to fix it on the second try. Instead of making sure the throw was accurate, Naruto always pushed too much force into it because his body was too excited. Kurama changed the power on the third and last throw, and the kunai hit the target just a few inches off dead center. I'll have to improve on that. Kurama was dissatisfied that his attempt to hit dead center wasn't entirely accurate. In reality, the nine-tailed fox was fiercely competitive. He had always enjoyed making fun of his fellow Biju by pointing out that he was more powerful because he had more tails. It was hurtful to know that despite his best efforts, he had fallen short, but that would be fixed in due time. Iruka thought it was a huge improvement. Naruto rarely improved his scores after a first failure and usually became increasingly irritated as he missed. "Good aim, Naruto," he said. Inside Naruto's body, Kurama let out a growl of disgust as he elicited the anticipated reaction. "I will be the strongest shinobi ever, Iruka. Sensei, believe it, how else can I protect you and Gigi?" Next up was the Uchiha, which hit the bull's eye 3 times in quick succession. Kurama noticed that Sasuke's gaze strayed to Naruto, and a small smirk formed on the boy's lips. The impulse to murder the haughty Uchiha was swiftly suppressed, but it persisted beneath the surface. Kurama considered planning an accident for Konoha's priceless last Uchiha. Surely, the boy's death was desired by many rival villages. No, that would be foolish. Kurama always had a group of Anbu guards with him, and the Hokage's elite Black Ops probably kept an eye on Sasuke as well. However, I will eventually purge that vile bloodline from the world. I refuse to be shackled once more. As Kurama passed his Hyuga classmate on her way to the next station, she was fiddling with her fingers. She uttered the barely audible words, "Good throw, Naruto." He had a suspicion that he would not have heard the comment if it weren't for the extra human senses that his host's body had been endowed with as a Jinchuriki. Kurama decided to disregard the remark. He reflected on the timid Hyuga girl. She was a clan heir who harbored an odd romantic interest in Naruto. Considering his recollections, Naruto had once defended her from some young bullies. It was a tenuous relationship, but it appeared to have affected her. Kurama could probably get Hinata to do nearly anything for him if he wanted to. It's a shame she's so incredibly frail. After that, the academy-based kata that the students had previously committed to memory was tested. Kurama was aware that Iruka's assistant teacher Mizuki had not corrected Naruto's incorrect memorization. Kurama did not correct the incorrect blocks and movements he made through Naruto's body because he could not care less about being praised for correctly performing such a basic fighting style kata. The civilian students were obviously lagging behind their clan counterparts, as demonstrated by the kunai accuracy practice. They lacked the sharp movements and had messy forms. Kurama found it intriguing that Iruka and Mizuki didn't appear to be making much of an attempt to fix more than 1 or 2 of them. Half of the class appears to have already been rejected as being too inept for training. It's likely that they will stop training before the official tests. Then lunchtime arrived. Kurama effectively consumed the well-balanced meal. Naruto would frequently annoy the weakling with the pink hair before Kurama took over, but Kurama would not do so. It would be in the persona he was attempting to play. He would still behave somewhat like Naruto, but he would be more reclusive and stop trying to make friends with Sakura. Following lunch, more theory was covered in class. Although most of the class found learning about velocity and explosion radiuses to be exhausting, Kurama thought that Fuinjutsu might have something to do with higher mathematics. He made Naruto's body twitchy to conceal his interest. After glancing around and shaking his head multiple times, he turned to face Iruka and the board. Since Kurama was a Biju, He didn't take notes, and although his memory wasn't perfect, it was close enough. His more developed mind was able to understand the concepts with ease, and he would not forget what was taught in class. Kiba threw a paper ball at Ino's head, distracting the class. Naruto, stop throwing things at me, Ino growled and whirled around. I didn't throw anything at you, protested Kurama, glancing at the girl with the blonde hair. Iruka spun around, but he couldn't see who had tossed it. He glanced at Naruto, who was scowling at Ino, before noticing the other students laughing behind him. Despite his youth, Iruka had prior teaching experience at the academy, and Kiba's face made it clear that he was the guilty party. Kiba, come up here and explain how to calculate the maximum distance of a thrown kunai using these variables. Moaning, Kiba said, I don't know how to do that crap. Then pay attention, exclaimed Iruka. Kiba was properly reprimanded, lowered his gaze, and behaved well throughout the remainder of the class. Kurama laughed to himself. Now that he was free and in charge of Naruto's body, the mutt found that his humiliation was much more fun. Now that he could engage with the outside world, the nine-tailed fox was taken aback by how much more fascinating everything was. You want me to do what? As she addressed her supreme military leader, the Tokubetsu Jonin asked a startlingly impolite question. The disrespectful question was not taken personally by the Sandaime, who smoked his pipe. In contrast to other villages, he allowed his subordinates to quarrel with him. He was wise enough and confident enough in his position to not consider such things offensive. Anko, I'm not asking for a great deal from you. Simply provide a few hours of supplemental training to Naruto. Anko was still having trouble understanding this. You want me to work with a child? I don't have time to play babysitter? The elderly gentleman grinned. Is that so? I could have sworn I heard you earlier say that there wasn't enough work to keep you entertained and that you would be eager to take on an extra mission. That was before I learned what it was. Gazing at the shinobi no kami, Anko grimaced. The game was still in play even though a point had been scored. Fine, I do have the time, but I'm completely unsuited for the task. I'm skilled at infiltration, assassination, interrogation and torture. I have never taught anyone anything. His voice and body shifted into what many jonin referred to as lecture mode. Hiruzen was known as the professor because of his extensive knowledge of jutsu and his habit of giving reasons for his choices. Anko, you are the perfect instructor. 1. You don't have any animosity toward Naruto. In fact, if I am reading you correctly, you actually empathize with the boy as his circumstances are similar to your own. 2. You are a highly competent shinobi well versed in taijutsu. 3. Due to your curse mark, you have learned to become highly aware of your own chakra and your control is similar to that of a genjutsu specialist or a medical nin. 4. I trust you. 5. Anko raised her hands. All right, enough, I'll do it. Anko appeared upset on the outside, but she was actually quite happy. Not about Naruto training. It was going to hurt. No, she was glad her Hokage had faith in her. Her life was filled with angry remarks and suspicious glances. Few were friendly with her. Despite his tough exterior, Ibiki had faith in her. Despite his constant friendliness, Guy irritated her. Her only real friend and confidant was Kurenai. Her confidence was greatly boosted by the Hokage expressing his faith in her. Thank you, Anko. Keep in mind that he is still in the academy and his psyche may be fragile. Go easy on him, at least for now, he said, grinning at her with his best grandfatherly smile. Anko gave a nod. Although Sarutobi had accurately read her, despite her sadistic tendencies, she did harbor a slight affection for Naruto. He was still a child who had been royally screwed by the village he served, just like her, but if their training relationship lasted long enough, she might display some of her sadistic side. The last portion of the day awaited them following additional classroom instruction, sparring. It was well received by many students. Competitive spirits were attracted to the shinobi arts. Naruto Uzumaki and Kiba Inuzuka were the two most talkative. Others, Sasuke foremost, were equally eager but remained silent. Kurama could see the boy's desire to prove himself. Not everybody was as excited. Kurama noticed that Hinata appeared even more anxious than usual. Shoji was always terrified of hurting someone, so he never liked sparring. Shikamaru simply didn't care and was lazy. Naruto was not his usual raucous self this time. Rather, Kurama displayed to the world a focused, industrious Naruto with a fiery gaze. This was not overlooked. Finally realize you aren't good enough? Ino asked the boy with a sly smile. Kurama thought of several ways to murder the girl. It might be enjoyable to squeeze her neck while she suffocates gradually. It had always been a favorite to burn with fire. However, she would be dead in an instant as he tore off her head if she enraged him enough to abandon his plan and kill without distinction. Fortunately for the young Yamanaka, he remained composed. Rather, his steady response was, "I'm not good enough. Not yet, but I will be." Snorting, Ino said, "Yeah, right." As the first bout started, more discussion was interrupted. Every student would engage in a one-on-one battle with a student selected at random. There was no clear rhyme or reason, but Kurama questioned whether it was really random. He stood idly by while Sasuke destroyed Hinata. 2 minutes would pass between each fight or 3 successful blows. Only 10 seconds had passed since Sasuke's match. Against a boy from the general public, Naruto's obsession with pink hair managed to win. It was Naruto's turn after that. He had to confront Shino. With a courteous tilt of his head, Shino started the match. Kurama foresaw the boy's initial strike and raised his arms in a careless block. A devastating counterattack would have been possible with a more accurate block, but Shino instead followed it up with a series of kicks to the midsection. Seeing the attack coming, Kurama moved into Shino's personal space and threw a punch that seemed more appropriate for a pub than a shinobi school. With his kick now useless and a punch screaming toward his face, the boy found himself in an awkward position. Not to be deterred, Shino raised his hand sharply and deflected the blow. He pushed forward, lowering his leg behind Naruto's. Naruto fell backwards from the push and the leg behind him, proving that the attack was effective even though it wasn't the most graceful. Kurama had anticipated that, but he had not anticipated experiencing pain. "I've never experienced my host suffering as deeply as I do. What's happening?" He pondered while lying on the ground. This was the first time a host's mind and personality had totally vanished. He was able to control the host without using his own chakra to do so, allowing him to physically experience the host's emotions rather than just intellectually. The throng of children was growing restless as his mind quickly weighed the advantages and disadvantages of this. "Get up, loser," Kiba yelled. Then Kurama stood up. Shino had been given 1 point. Kurama made the decision to introduce them to vintage Naruto. He charged Shino and threw himself into the air with a flying kick. If his opponent hadn't been so bad, or perhaps if he hadn't launched himself so early, the kick might have been successful. As it was, Shino easily sidestepped the attack and gave Naruto a firm punch to the ribs as he swooped by. Although Kurama's landing was sufficiently elegant, another point had already been scored. Kurama carried on the performance. Kurama was eager to put an end to the little charade, but for the time being, a few words and some foolish gestures would allay suspicions. "I'm going to win, believe it," he said, pointing at Shino. Shino maintained his composure and remained vigilant. Kurama moved forward with ease and delivered a simple series of academy kicks that were just off target enough to keep Shino from ending it right away. Shino's blocks had no openings and were textbook. Shino just missed Kurama's attempt at a leg sweep. Kurama made the decision to try to score a point while Shino was on the defensive after the dodge. It was Naruto's body. The recent dietary and exercise changes were not yet going to have much of an impact. Naruto also had the muscle memory. The intelligence, however, was very different. Kurama was aware of his limited resources, but they were sufficient for a small win. With a burst of energy, Kurama launched himself from the ground. This was unexpected in contrast to his poorly timed flying kick earlier. To his credit, Shino remained vigilant, but he was unable to avoid it. With his forearms in the lead, Naruto struck Shino's guard. Shino was taken aback by the unexpected impact and struck the ground forcefully, but Kurama managed to roll Shino over and recover. Although the attack was not very elegant and would have been a bad idea in a real battle if the enemy had just swung a kunai, it had succeeded. The audience was taken aback when Naruto made a point. Naruto lost almost all of the time, usually without gaining any points. Without showing any signs of distress, Shino just stood up and attacked. With roughly 30 seconds remaining, Shino won the match after a series of careless blocks that resulted in a kick to a knife hand to the midsection. Kurama watched the upcoming fights, but there wasn't much interest. As the day drew to a close, Kurama was satisfied with his performance. He had kept his cover and hadn't killed any of the rodents. He would gradually alter everyone's opinion of the boy. Being the last to die was unacceptable to him. He would have to advance quickly through the shinobi ranks. Kurama wanted to acquire the jutsu and knowledge necessary to avoid ever being enslaved by the Sharingan or trapped with Fuinjutsu again. He could really balance the scales and let out his rage once he had that. After the academy students were dismissed, Anko had no trouble identifying Naruto. He wasn't very attractive. He wore an ugly orange jumpsuit, had untidy hair, and was shorter than most of his classmates. He took his time, scanning the area for his new teacher. After letting him search for a while as the children scattered, she went up to him. "You must be Naruto. I am Anko Mitarashi, your new trainer." Kurama turned to face the teacher the elderly man had located for Naruto. He was instantly irritated by her enthusiastic, a little too loud voice. His second impression was marginally better after he studied her covertly. The woman had toned, slender muscles. She exuded an effortless elegance that belied her skills. A startling number of weapons were concealed on her person. The Sandame had discovered a capable teacher. That was a good thing because it would make his rapid improvement less surprising. "Hey Anko, I hope you're strong, and why do you say that?" "Because if you aren't strong someone will kill you because you're training me." She chuckled. "Kid, you don't have to worry about that. Didn't I already tell you my name is Anko Mitarashi?" To be honest, Kurama couldn't remember the name. It was not as though the villagers gossiped with Naruto, and experts in torture and interrogation did not congregate at the academy. So I guess you're strong." After a few moments of staring at him, Anko sagged and said, "Wow, I guess you really haven't heard of me." Kurama wasn't sure if the kunoichi was acting or if she was truly depressed. After a few moments of staying that way, Mitarashi grinned. "I am the beautiful, deadly and amazing Anko Mitarashi. You don't have to worry about anyone harming me because I'm training you. I am a Tokubetsu Jonin and a damn scary one too. I eat rank missions for breakfast and no one dares mess with me. Now follow me." After a moment, Kurama followed Anko as he launched himself into a light run. They were in one of the training fields that was not being used in 10 minutes or less, so the run wasn't very long. "You got some stamina, good." Kurama grinned to himself. Because Naruto's body contained a biju, it only had stamina. The undernourished child would have likely been wheezing and panting if it weren't for that. That would soon change, though, as his host's body would become stronger due to the consistent diet and conditioning. "All right kid, let's see what you got. Try to hit me." After analyzing Naruto's potential response, Kurama concluded that he most likely would have accepted the offer and launched an attack. So that's what he did. He began by throwing his entire body into a Naruto style punch, which is basically an academy punch with much too much weight and force. Anko escaped the punch with ease. Anko told Kurama to stop before he could say anything more. "What the hell was that? Are you training to be a shinobi or a drunken civilian in a bar?" Kurama chuckled to herself at her remark. "What are you talking about? I'm going to be a strong shinobi. If that punch would have hit you would have gone down." Anko held back a sigh and kept up her jovial demeanor. To be honest, it was becoming difficult to refrain from hitting the naive child. He was attempting to defend a pointless punch. All the power in the world isn't going to help if you can't actually make contact. And a punch like that could be dodged easily. Do you know why? Despite being well aware that the attack was too clearly telegraphed, Kurama shook his head. "Because your arm said it was going to punch. Your shoulder said it was going to punch. Your entire body told me before your fist was even on its way that it was going to punch." Kurama gave his trainer a blank stare. Anko only stopped grinding her teeth because of her infiltration and secret op training. "I am telling you that you made it obvious, and since you made it obvious I could avoid it." "Oh, why didn't you just say so in the first place?" Anko suppressed the urge to choke the runt by forcing her facial muscles to relax. "Let's just move on. Your next problem is that because you brought your arm backwards the blow was too slow. When you punch you never pull back. The extra power isn't worth the loss of time. Here, I'll show you." Anko quickly punched the air, ensuring that the Genin's eyes could see it because of the slow speed. Although her shoulder had hardly moved, the blow was clearly powerful. "Yeah, but I bet you would have more power if you pulled your arm back like I did." As the Jonin attempted to conceal her rage, Kurama laughed. He was making her irritated, which made Kurama laugh. To be fair, he wouldn't have been able to tell if he wasn't a biju and was a student at the academy. She had good control over her eyes and facial muscles. Unless you're Tsunade of the Sannin or an Akamichi, forget about brute force. A shinobi strikes with precision. A fast punch that connects is worth 1,000 of your punches that will never hit. Kurama kept luring her in. "Yeah, but if it did hit it would be awesome." After a few moments of staring at him, Anko said, "Maybe I'm going about this the wrong way, Naruto. You wanted extra training and I am going to give it to you. Try my way and I guarantee you that your academy spars will go better." Kurama nodded his head, deciding he had had enough amusement for the moment. With a radiant smile, Anko started teaching Naruto punches that prioritized speed over force. She was happy with his development after about 20 minutes and proceeded to work on his kicks. They concluded their first hour together by reviewing fundamental punch and kick combinations from his new toolkit. Using these types of attacks will improve your taijutsu, and they make up the basic building blocks for the rest of the moves I'll be showing you. Time to see how well you can mold chakra. Make a bunshin for me. In reality, even if Kurama wanted to, he couldn't make a typical bunshin. It was impossible to measure out the tiny amount of chakra needed to do it. Overloading other jutsu with chakra would have little effect. For instance, if he overloaded a kawarimi, it would only produce too much noise and smoke. However, if a bunshin was overloaded, it would create clones that were unable to support themselves. Following instructions, Kurama formed the tiger seal, snake, and ram gradually. Next to him, the clone appeared about 10 shades paler than it should have, fell to the ground right away, and then, like a deflated balloon, started to shrink in on itself before dissipating. The woman with the violet hair raised an eyebrow and said, "Try that again." Kurama did so, but the outcome was the same. Again. Failure. Again. Failure. Again. Failure. The woman was beginning to irritate Kurama. She knew this wasn't working, didn't she? "You are using way too much chakra. Did Iruka go over the leaf exercise with you yet?" she finally said after a dozen tries. Kurama reflected on Naruto's recollections. Indeed, he had, but Naruto hadn't really listened. "I think so, but I don't remember it too well." "That's fine. We are going to use a variation of it that might be a bit easier anyway." Naruto held out his palm as Anko grabbed a leaf from a nearby tree. She set the leaf on his hand and said, "The easiest place to channel chakra is your hands. They're the most tactile part of your body. They're your primary means of interacting with the world. I want you to focus your chakra on your hand so that the leaf gently rises up." Kurama had been doing the typical leaf concentration exercise for the past few days. The leaf abruptly shot into the air, reflecting the fact that he hadn't made much progress. He chuckled, "You have some power there, kid, but like your punch, we need you to learn control." In imitation of Naruto, Kurama mimicked his demeanor and used his hand to rub the back of his head. Naruto received a handful of leaves from his instructor. "Practice with these at least an hour a day. Once you've mastered that, we'll move on to channeling chakra into other parts of your body like your forehead and eventually your feet." "Okay, I can do that. We'll meet tomorrow after your classes. See you then, kid." Kurama was left alone when Anko vanished in a flurry of leaves. Well, not precisely. Kurama was aware that 4 Anbu continued to follow him around. He was stalked by more experienced Anbu since the murders of the ramen stand owners. He was aware that there were 4, but occasionally his enhanced senses would completely lose one of them. Kurama dutifully practiced for about half an hour before shifting his focus from chakra control to punches and kicks. In Kurama's imagination, Naruto's tendency to get bored easily was entirely consistent with his personality. He would use chakra control to make up for lost time once he got back to the dingy apartment. Anko barged into the compound used for torture and interrogation. When her co-workers noticed that she was in one of her moods, they prudently avoided her company. "Ibiki, tell me we have someone to torture today." The only person in the building who was not intimidated was Ibiki Morino, the head of Konoha Intelligence Division. "Yeah, we have a couple of small fries that need to be roughed up a bit. Not important though, they'll crack in a few days anyway." "Do you need them alive afterwards?" Ibiki gave a headshake. Seldom were spies permitted to survive, even if they were inept and comparatively harmless. "Good, I'll be out in a few hours." Ibiki gave a nod. He didn't enjoy his job the way Anko did. Her delight in breaking someone else's heart might be unsettling to some, but he knew that people performed better when they were doing what they enjoyed. She looked at the file and took the cell key. As long as she achieved her goals, Ibiki let her do whatever she pleased. While enjoying herself, she would have to make sure she got the information. When Anko opened the cell door, a small woman was inside. Despite having few curves, the girl was comparatively attractive. She had been attempting to gather information while sleeping with a Chunin. The Chunin alerted the T&I division when her inquiries began to raise suspicions, and they arrived to collect her. Other than the fact that the little mole was a terrible liar, not much was revealed by the initial interrogation. She went into the cell where the girl, Margie, was kept. The girl's hands had not even been restrained because she wasn't a shinobi. Without much delay, Anko seized the frightened girl by the hair. She pushed against the wall, face first. In her ear, she growled, "Tell me who sent you." The frantic woman said, N.N01. "I am. Moved here and wanted to find a good shinobi who could provide for me. My family is poor and..." Pulling out a kunai, Anko pressed it to her captive's cheek. She allowed it to pierce her flesh. The girl attempted to squirm, but Anko held her tightly. Even though the cut wasn't very deep, it hurt, and it would get worse as Anko applied more pressure, pressing the kunai firmly against the cheekbone. Anko licked the girl's lips as she sobbed in fear. She wouldn't be broken by much more. Too simple. Tell me who sent you. Oh Kami, I swear no one did. I just moved here to find a good shinobi who could provide. The formerly attractive girl was left scarred after the kunai tore down her face by a few inches. Her legs attempted to give out as she screamed in agony, but the torture specialist was able to support her by her hair with ease. Tell me who sent you. Stop, I'll tell you, please just stop. Anko smiled. What a coward. Talk, snarled she. She was told by Margie that a wealthy man had approached her. Despite not wearing a forehead protector, she was aware that he was from a different village. He was interested in learning more about the village. Margie informed Anko that the man was particularly interested in any shinobi missions that went to Kei's no Kuni, Land of Wind. She had been given a cover story by the man, one about a woman who wanted to marry a shinobi. In 3 months, after gathering as much information as she could, she would be contacted and given enough money to avoid working or becoming reliant on anyone. Anko lifted the girl back up by the hair after obtaining all the information she required. I told you everything, no more, please, Anko grinned. I believe you. For the next half hour, screams reverberated throughout the cell and down the corridor. I suppose I better go make the report. Anko sobbed as he left the girl. After her victims had revealed everything they knew, it was always funny to cause them pain. Sometimes she liked to act as though she didn't think they were real. They still believed that she would stop if they could only persuade her to believe, which is why their desperate pleas were so intense. For the most part, though, she simply relished the horrified realization that was permanently etched on Margie's face. She was utterly delighted by the despair of knowing that nothing in the world could stop the pain. She reported to Ibiki after leaving the cell. We have a description of the person who sent her, but it was likely a shinobi under a henge. The little shit didn't know anything else, including why they were interested in learning about missions to Suna territory. Ibiki was aware that business that would have typically gone to Sunagakure had been sent to Konoha by the Wind Daimyo. Agents from Suna might be actively attempting to ambush Konoha shinobi who were carrying out those missions, or they might be attempting to comprehend the extent of the missions they were losing. Hell, one of Suna's adversaries might even be pulling a false flag operation. Simply put, they lacked sufficient data to work with. Good to know. What's with your mood today? Anko breathed deeply. Babysitting duty on orders from the Hokage. I have to train the Kyuubi container. I feel for the little guy, but his mouth makes me want to knock his teeth out. Ibiki laughed. I see, so you decided to come in even though you weren't on shift to relieve some stress? He grinned. Got it in one, boss man. It's almost as if you're good at reading people or something. Ibiki dismissed her light-hearted repartee. All right, I'll have the prisoner executed. Why don't you go blow off steam doing something normal? She raised her eyebrows. Not my style. I'll go back and finish the prisoner. I'll deliver her body in about 5 or 6 hours. Ibiki just nodded, but Shinobu Mibu got to his feet. What is wrong with you? You have all of the information you need, give her a clean death. Shinobu was a new member of the intelligence division in a Chunin. Even though he had been doing missions in the shinobi world for a few years, he was courageous and still a little naive. He continued to believe that Konoha was as honorable and pure as their propaganda said. Ibiki, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Did this little Chunin just try to defend a known spy? Do you think he might be in cahoots? Anko asked him, staring at him incredulously. That's insane. I've severed Konoha for years, I would never betray the will of fire, said Shinobu after taking a deep breath. Shinobu flinched as Anko's hand touched his face as she sashayed towards him. Did she seduce you too? Are you weak to that form of persuasion? Should I interrogate you next? The Chunin was becoming increasingly frightened. He continued to cast anxious glances at Ibiki's expressionless face. Then Ibiki said, Enough, Anko. Stick to terrorizing our actual enemies, and he stopped. No fun at all, Ibiki. I wasn't going to hurt him, much. As Anko whistled joyfully down the hall to Margie's cell, Shinobu sat back down and remained silent. Margie saw her tormentor when she looked up. I don't know anything more. I swear, please just let me go. How stupid are you? You tried to spy on our village, and your sentence is death, she said, laughing at her prisoner. Margie broke down in tears. Anko just observed her. The girl eventually stopped crying after a few minutes and looked up. Okay, do it. I won't fight, just please make it quick. Anko found it difficult to maintain a straight face. Make it quick? Oh, you stupid little girl. I don't plan on leaving this cell for a long time. Anko saw the whites clearly, and Margie's eyes widened. With complete fear in her eyes, she staggered away from Anko. Margie noticed the glints of madness in Anko's brown eyes as he took it all in. As Anko got closer, Margie started to scream. The cries became softer as Anko started, reverberating through the corridors and into Shinobu's ears. But he wasn't particularly troubled by that. The Chunin was frightened by Anko's laughter. As he reflected on the day, Kurama worked on controlling his chakras. He had been hurt. Not his own pain, but that of his host. Pain was nothing new to him. It had been a terrible binding while in Kushina. But why would he feel his host's pain now when he had never felt it before? Kurama finally concluded after further consideration that it was a sign of his particular circumstance. It was the first time he had truly lived as a Jinchuriki. He was a passive observer, so he was not affected by Naruto's joy or suffering. Naruto's senses became his senses while he was in command. Both comfort and pain were palpable to him. It was fascinating but unnerving. As long as he had been alive, Kurama had always found that unusual experiences were alluring. Perhaps it wouldn't be as annoying as he initially believed, but Kurama didn't want to live out Naruto's life any longer than absolutely necessary. He ate his wholesome meal following his daily conditioning and chakra control exercises in the secure environment of his apartment. He had never noticed taste before, but now he was pleased by the flavors. Even though I am enjoying this, I am aware that it has drawbacks. Will I come across food that I don't like? Despite his uncertainty, Kurama decided to try to cover up his taste buds. He was unable to. He shrugged. A bad odor or bad. Tasting food would not be an issue in comparison to the agonizing restraints he had endured through sporadic pain. The growing strength was the cause for concern. He could quickly acquire strength and ability without anyone noticing thanks to private tutoring, a better diet, and a renewed drive to get stronger so he could protect others. Kurama grinned while rehearsing the punches and kicks Anko had demonstrated to him. Everything was proceeding as planned. The following day at the academy was largely identical to the day before. Kurama pretends to be Naruto trying to focus. He thought fondly of tearing the other kids to pieces, but he ignored most of their jabs. He fantasized lovingly about killing them in ways that were more and more agonizing. The Biju were not only irritated by those who made fun of him. Choji was constantly eating chips, which distracted him. But above all the small grievances and insults, the Uchiha was the one person the nine-tailed fox wished to murder. Yes, the haughtiness and cocky confidence were annoying, but Kurama wasn't particularly offended. No, it was those eyes that threatened to enslave him that frightened him. Being the greatest of all the Biju, he could allow a mortal to control his thoughts. His determination to stay undercover increased along with his rage. He would continue the act. He practiced with his personal tutor after class. All right Gaki, did you work on your chakra exercises? I did. Can I learn some really strong jutsu now? Kurama said, nodding. When it came time to talk about jutsu in class, Naruto had not been very attentive. Naruto had always been dissatisfied with the kind of jutsu that the academy taught him. He desired powerful, ostentatious jutsu. Kurama would continue the performance. You kids think a powerful jutsu is all you need to be a shinobi, said Anko, rolling her eyes. Well yeah. Even though Mitarashi was doing a good job of hiding it, Kurama could tell that his Naruto acting was getting on her nerves. He was quickly making it his favorite game. Would he agitate his tutor to the point of losing it? The young torture specialist would have been surprised to hear that anyone could have sensed it, but he was growing irritated. A senbon flew directly into Naruto's shoulder as Anko's hand moved in a blur. Although Kurama had anticipated the attack, he was powerless to stop it without using his own chakra. An academy student and an experienced shinobi were very different in terms of speed and power. Ow, that hurt, don't be a baby, she said with a smile, it's not any worse than a needle. The brat will realize how lethal a simple needle can be when I give him the antidote and he collapses unconscious. Idiotic brat talking about jutsu when he would be instantly killed by a true shinobi. Although it had arisen earlier than she had anticipated, it was a lesson she had prepared in advance. The sandame wouldn't be overly irritated, but the boy might get a little shaken. She wasn't really using a deadly poison, after all. The issue was that Naruto was not collapsing. Kurama felt the knockout drug try to take effect, and he laughed inside. The chakra coursing through his body was strong enough to stop the venom from working, so even the real Naruto would not have fallen from it. Although he was not impervious to all poisons, it would take more than that to put him out of commission. So are we going to train or what? The fox demon inside his host snickered as Anko blinked and muttered something under her breath. Although the kunoichi were aware of the superior vitality of Jinchuriki, they did not believe that this would make the knockout drug ineffective. She decided it was time for petty retaliation after her plan failed. All right, this will show you, you dumb brat. I think it's time I tested the knowledge you gained in the academy. Anko's response made Kurama laugh uncontrollably. He was pretty sure she hadn't intended to spend the next few hours lecturing Naruto. However, she was now trying to annoy and torture Naruto with even more boring training because she had been stopped earlier. She was actually very funny, and his respect for her increased. What? You're supposed to train me and make me strong, don't turn into Iruka. Sensei no. She found the boy's outburst amusing. Knowledge is the root of all power, so I'm going to make sure you have all the knowledge you need. Thus, 2 hours went by while Anko reviewed the most dull topics. How did the chakra paper get made? It was created by unique trees that required meticulous cultivation. Regarding how to best take care of those trees, there were two schools of thought. Traditionalists, who felt that the chakra should grow as naturally as possible, disagreed with the school of thought that suggested regular tree pruning to better preserve the chakra at its core. Anko talked endlessly about the advantages and disadvantages of each approach. Kurama was unable to contain his admiration. You had to put in a lot of effort to be that uninteresting, and for some reason, she was happy to bore herself in order to see the annoyance Kurama permitted to show on Naruto's face. I think I hate her the most out of all the pitiful villagers here. Another traumatic day at the academy awaited us the following day. There were numerous minor irritations in the classroom. Every one of the clan children had a trait that annoyed him. However, the problem wasn't just them. The civilians were actually much more annoying in some respects. The Uchiha wannabe was one of the civilian boys. The waste of space tried to throw shuriken and kunai like Sasuke, imitated his taijutsu, and styled his hair like Sasuke. It was genuinely pitiful. When the boy, whose name was Noboru, finally eradicated the vile bloodline, Kurama declared that he would regard him as an honorary Uchiha. He could die like Uchiha if that was his desire. His sparring match against the Uchiha wannabe went fairly well, despite the fact that it had only been a few days. Kurama refrained from fighting. His superior senses were able to make up for his lack of strength and speed. In contrast to the perfect precision that his superior mind would have permitted him to achieve, his fighting stances and forms were purposefully sloppy. Rather, he delivered a forceful kick to the boy's ribs and a punch to the shoulder before the boy struck him a third time. Though he knew he could have won, he lost. Noboru, like Sasuke, accepted his victory in silence. He even left in the same haughty manner. Kurama promised to beat the little shit bloody the next time. The Hyuga girl fumbled with her hands and then shyly glanced at the pretend Naruto as he took his place with the other children. Y.ud. Did a good job Naruto. Kurama wondered what Naruto would have said as he observed the frail girl. Getting praise from his peers was extremely uncommon for him. Not only was it uncommon, but it never occurred. His choice was sullen but determined. No, I didn't, I lost. The young heiress appeared surprised until Naruto went on. But I will win eventually. I'm going to get stronger and then I'll make sure no one will be able to harm my friends again. Since Naruto had no friends, Kurama rolled his eyes inwardly. However, it made sense and aligned with the general impression he wished Konoha to have of Uzumaki. The academy day was finally over, and Kurama's daily training with his tutor began. When Kurama arrived at the training area, Anko was eating some dango. All right, shrimp, now that I filled your head with knowledge, let's do some more work on your fighting stance. Kurama followed directions, and the meeting was fruitful. It was beneficial to have a second pair of eyes, even though Kurama could learn just fine on his own. The attacks that Anko was demonstrating to Naruto were not academy style, and she was aware of her business. They were more concerned with hitting quickly and at key locations or groups of nerves. These attacks are all weird like. None of the academy sensei does it like this. And it had begun so nicely, Anko thought. Before he had to open his big mouth, the little brat was actually being cooperative. Well, Gaki, the attacks are different because I'm teaching you a different fighting style. You remember what the academy taught you about different fighting styles? Kurama did remember some discussion of it. The academy taught its members a fighting style that was mainly fundamental and intended to incapacitate rather than kill. Iruka had also mentioned other styles. The Hyuga clan employed the Juken, gentle fist. Another fighting style he remembered learning about was the Saru no Ken, monkey's fist, which the Hokage was an expert in. The Goken, strong fist, was another fighting style. The gentle fist style was elegant and concentrated on using chakra to inflict internal damage and interfere with an opponent's chakra network. Attacks in the strong fist style were forceful and swift. It was mostly an offensive style that used strength and speed to deliver bone-breaking, devastating blows. The primary focus of the monkey's fist was grappling attacks. Kurama was aware of all of this, but Naruto's profile wouldn't allow him to recall it all. Yes. Some styles are about kicking and others are about punching. Anko found it difficult to stay still. She maintained a composed and serene exterior that briefly deceived Kurama. I guess I'll have to explain the major fighting styles to you. Anko essentially expressed what Kurama had been considering, but she also added her own style. I use the Habi, snake, style. The focus of the style is to strike quickly and lethally. It is about precision rather than brute force. So it's like the Juken, gentle fist, but without the cool chakra blocking thing. Anko gave a headshake. Not the same at all. The Habi style is so much more. It is about blocking and attacking slightly slower than your precision attack. It is about using your eyes and body to send false signals to the enemy. It is about using your whole body and making it as limber as possible. We've barely scratched the surface, kid. Naruto appeared unsure, so Anko said, I think Goken might be better because it has the word strong in it. I must not murder my pupil. My student must not be killed. I don't teach that style, so you'll just have to take my training and you can always change styles in the future, she said, forcing a smile. From deep inside his host's mind, Kurama laughed. She was so furious that she was almost trembling. It was unlikely that an academy student would pick it up, but most shinobi would be able to tell. Fine, but you still need to teach me a good jutsu. And by good jutsu I assume you mean a ninjutsu? Yeah. Like how to breathe fire like Sasuke, Teme. Most shinobi don't learn their chakra affinity until they are chunin and you aren't even a genin yet. Chakra affinity? Then she said, I know by now they would have taught you about chakra affinities. It's part of the theory in the second year. With embarrassment, Kurama scratched his head. I must have forgot. The real Naruto had gone to sleep, but Kurama had not forgotten. Sighing, you need to go back through your academy texts and learn about it, and no, I won't be teaching you elemental ninjutsu. When you have become proficient on the basics of the Habi style and you have better chakra control, I might, maybe, just possibly teach you a ninjutsu. But it won't be how to breathe fire. In a pantomime of what the real Naruto would have done, Kurama kicked the ground in despair. Kurama was interested in finding out Naruto's affinities. In Hai no Kuni, Fire Country, the Kaden affinity was the most prevalent, but that didn't mean anything. Given Naruto's chakra levels, ninjutsu would be an effective weapon. Many shinobi were only able to use a small number of ninjutsu before they were worn out. Kurama wouldn't have any trouble with that. They worked on chakra control for the remainder of the day before splitting up. Kurama went back to the apartment and carried on with his chakra control and conditioning exercises. Since he had so little experience in his natural form, chakra control was a difficult task. But his mind was very focused, and he was determined. Although progress was slow, he was gradually becoming more in control. Anko spent the remainder of the week honing the fundamentals of his taijutsu technique. Kurama appreciated the fighting style and could see how the other academy students would be sufficiently intimidated by it. Chakra control was still incredibly slow. With one day off, academy classes were held 6 days a week. Kurama didn't have any lessons with Anko or in the academy that day. Rather, Kurama heard a knock on the door and opened it to find the Sandaime Hokage grinning. Gigi, Naruto-kun, how was your first week back at the academy? It was all right. I learned a lot more with Anko though, Kurama shrugged. Wonderful, I'm happy to hear that. Would you like to get something to eat? Kurama gave Naruto a gloomy expression, which was followed by a brief nod. Sure, Gigi. Let me do this first though. The dog, boar, and ram seals required to use henge no jutsu were meticulously created by Kurama. Naruto vanished, to be replaced by a slightly taller boy with gray eyes and brownish hair. Hiruzen understood Naruto's motivation right away. It was a sensible decision given the degree of discrimination the boy experienced. The move was shinobi. He simply detested the fact that he thought it was required. Kurama loved the sad expression in the old man's eyes. As they made their way to one of Konoha's eateries, neither of them spoke for a short while. Ramen was one of several options at the informal diner where the Hokage chose to take him. He didn't want Naruto to believe he was looking for someone to take Ramen Ichiraku's place. He believed that Naruto's decision to order sushi with a tray of greens rather than ramen was a wise one. I'm glad to see you eating healthier, Naruto-kun. Kurama sighed and turned the knife around. I need to be strong. I like having friends, but I won't allow myself to make any until I've gotten really strong. You said vegetables will make me strong, so I eat them all the time. Every time Hiruzen spoke with Naruto, he couldn't help but feel sad. The boy had clearly been affected by the deaths of Tuchi and his daughter. He was now taking his ninja training seriously, which was a bright spot. Less than 2 weeks had passed, and Naruto already appeared to be glowing healthier. So what has Anko-san been teaching you? Lots of stuff. She's teaching me to fight differently. I can tell my kicks and punches are getting faster. She also does boring stuff like Iruka. Sensei, Kurama said after finishing another large mouthful of fish. Sarutobi laughed. Despite his solemn shinobi training mask, Naruto was still Naruto. Say Gigi, can you teach me a really cool ninjutsu? Anko says I'm not ready and I have to do a lot of stuff before she says she'll even think about it. Naruto, Anko is your part. Time sensei now. If she thinks it's best that you wait, then you should wait, the Hokage said with a patient smile. Kurama nodded grimly. He considered crying as he explained that he needed a new jutsu to become stronger, but he thought it would be a bit excessive. It's best not to overdo it because eventually even the elderly idiot may realize. Ah Gigi, that's not fair. I really want to learn how to breathe fire like Sasuke. Teme. After a while of back and forth, the two concluded that their meal was over and that the Hokage needed to return to his work. Naruto, I want you to keep practicing with Anko-san, and keep eating your vegetables and paying attention in class. I know you will be a great shinobi. I believe in you. Kurama laughed and howled. They had lost Naruto. The nine-tailed fox was alone. When it came time to tell the elderly man that Naruto was long gone, I hoped he wouldn't croak first. All the way back to the apartment where he resumed his training, he carried that pleasant thought with him. Anko informed her student, today we are going to learn about poison. After another training week, Naruto's taijutsu skills continued to advance. In the academy spars, he had even assaulted a civilian child. Although she was aware that he still had a ways to go, she was impressed by his progress. Kurama had little interest in poison. He liked to confront people directly when he was out and about as the Kyuubi. If you're strong, you don't need to use poison. The torture specialist wished she could take back all the positive thoughts she had just had about her pupil. The child did have an annoying mouth, but he was beginning to understand the hubby style. He spoke without planning, just what came to mind. In a way, Anko enjoyed the child's unpredictable nature, but she was afraid he would never learn misdirection, which was a necessary skill for shinobi. Are you always going to be the strongest? I will be one day. Believe it, Anko took an alternative approach. Are you the strongest now? Well, no, will you be the strongest tomorrow? He gave a headshake. What about next week or next month? No, he said, kicking the floor. So until you are the strongest you will learn how to use poison. It can be an edge you need to win a fight against a stronger shinobi. Also sometimes your missions as a shinobi will call on you killing something without violence. Poison slipped into a rebellious noble that makes it look like he died of natural causes is far better than slitting his throat and making him a martyr. Kurama gave Naruto permission to widen his eyes. The kunoichi before him impressed him once more. She was a great sensei and knew what she was doing. Despite this, he continued to needle her. Okay, I'll learn how to use poison. She continued by listing a few of the less harmful toxins she would be collaborating with him on. One general use poison is what we like to call the knockout drug. It's quite safe to use against almost all targets and it simply knocks them unconscious for a short period of time. So is it a poison or a drug? Anko mumbled, I'm not a medical nin so I don't know the practical difference. Really if it does something to interfere with your enemy's body then I call it a poison. I use drug, poison and toxin interchangeably. They talked about how the poison was applied to different weapons. It was not a good idea to wear it on a kunai because a kunai could cause a big wound. Rather, a senbon was the best weapon. Needles. Those seem like girly weapons. Anko gave Naruto a hard backhand without thinking. Although Kurama tasted blood and was in pain, he was secretly gloating over his triumph. It was glorious that he had caused her to lose her temper. A moment of panic flashed across Anko's face, but she quickly covered it up and smiled down at the fallen academy student. What did I tell you about keeping your guard up? If I was an enemy in a henge you could be dead by now. This made Kurama chuckle to himself. She would pretend it was a training exercise rather than an outburst directed at a disobedient student. He didn't really want to miss the training, so it was okay with him. By improving as a shinobi, he would be able to avoid revealing his identity in the field by using his own chakra. After wiping the blood from Naruto's mouth, Kurama stood up and turned to face his tutor. Have you ever used a senbon before? Anko asked. Kurama gave a headshake. That day, they completed their training. learning about different poisons and toxins that could be used, and practicing with Senbon. Anko intended to give Naruto multiple doses of the knockout drug in addition to a mild poison that thinned the blood and facilitated bleeding from wounds. If he applied it to other people, neither was harmful. The knockout drug is a common tool, so many shinobi have learned to use chakra to neutralize it. It's almost mandatory training for Chunin in Konoha, but not all hidden villages are as familiar with it. Anko gave him a botany book about different plants that could be harvested to make poisons as a last act. I hate reading. She felt the impulse to strike him again, but she restrained herself this time. Finish it by the end of the week unless you want another lecture on where chakra paper comes from. After complaining and accepting the assignment, Kurama left. To his own surprise and in secret, Kurama was fascinated by the use of poison. When he got back to the apartment, he devoured the book. It was possible to gather simple plants and use parts of them to make compounds that would quickly kill any shinobi. Why weren't they used by more shinobi? Having antidotes for every poison on hand was nearly impossible due to its extreme lethality and variety. A loud argument over who would sit next to Sasuke-kun again assaulted Kurama's ears at the academy the following day. Every day, Ino and Sakura had this argument, and Kurama questioned whether the haughty bastard purposefully chose a seat at the end of a row just to have that argument. Kurama gave serious thought to going out and stuffing a belladonna root into their noisy mouths. Not very subtle, but it would silence the banshees for all time. Iruka stormed into the classroom and yelled at the two students to take a seat in the back. Wonderful, they will now be beside me. Kurama watched as Noboru sat down beside Sasuke. I hate having to sit next to Naruto. Baka, Sakura remarked as she took a seat. I do too, billboard brow. But it was your fault, Ino. Pig. I was the one who saw the seat first. As the two preteen girls quarreled over who got to see the seat next to Sasuke first, Kurama sat between them. The worst torture I had ever endured in my life was the seal that kept me inside Kushina. Until now. Iruka yelled at the two to keep quiet, sparing him from his agony. Now the lesson could start. Shinobi rank classification in bingo books was the topic of today's lesson. Instead of receiving bingo books, they observed Iruka writing information on the board. There are 4 threat level classifications we give shinobi. Can anyone tell me what they are? Immediately responding, Sakura held up her hand and said, the ranks are C, B, A and S. Very good, now someone else explain why we don't have a D rank. Ino's first response, since she didn't want to lose to her opponent, was, if someone is a D rank then they aren't going to be part of a bingo book. Iruka replied, exactly. Now remember, the rank in a bingo book doesn't mean someone is a genin or a chunin. Some shinobi may graduate from the academy already quite skilled but have not yet had time to take the chunin exams. In other cases, a very strong shinobi could have suffered an illness or injury that greatly reduced their ability to fight. They would keep their rank in their village, be it chunin or jonin, but might get downgraded in the bingo books. This conversation struck Kurama as being extremely fundamental and irrelevant. A few minutes of reading would have given him the same information. It did, however, pique his interest. What rank did Anko hold? It was time for additional accuracy practice with kunai and shuriken after the lecture portion of the day was over. After that, sparring was scheduled. Naruto was facing Ino this time. Just for the quiet, I'll bruise her larynx. Ino and Kurama both adopted the academy style posture. A particular stance was not necessary for the Hobby style. Since the Yamanaka clan's teachings were more cerebral in nature, they lacked a distinctive taijutsu style. Ino had a history of defeating Naruto in battle and was eager to do so once more. In terms of taijutsu, she was the best kunoichi in the class and could compete with the majority of the boys. Of course, he wasn't her Sasuke-kun, but nobody could defeat him. Naruto slid to the side and Ino confidently delivered a snap kick that missed him by an inch. When Ino was barely able to block Naruto's piercing blow, she was taken aback. Ino was forced to back up or take a hard blow after Naruto pushed in close and gave him an elbow to the head. When Ino had to back up, her footing became less certain and her attack potential was diminished. She was crowded by Naruto, who prevented her from regaining her speed. She wasn't used to the light, quick punches that zoomed in at slightly different angles. She saw an opening after 30 seconds and launched her own attack. Kurama was already moving perpendicular to the strike, anticipating the attack. He delivered a kick for the first time during the game, and Ino was struck in the throat. She brought her hands to her neck and rubbed it after the blow. Iruka hurried over and made sure there were no serious injuries. Although she coughed a few times and it sounded painful, there was none. The students were taken aback by Naruto's aggression. Shikamaru squinted. That was definitely not academy fashion. And from what he could see, the blow to her neck was intentional. Although their families were close, he found Ino to be problematic. The thought of the blonde's speech being impaired for the next few days made Kurama snicker. Ino had a determined expression on her face as the match went on. She leapt forward and began with a series of quick kicks. Ino was able to exhaust herself as the nine-tailed fox retreated from the kicks. Although a kick was more taxing than a punch, it could have greater force and range. Additionally, unless your opponent stood and blocked the attack, it was challenging to follow up. Ino rushed forward as she became irritated. The class watched as Naruto took a step back and then suddenly rushed forward, jabbing Ino in the middle. Ino missed her block because she was taken aback by how quickly the attack came. Kurama backed up as she doubled over in agony, and he won the second point. "Hey, when did the dobi get so good?" Kiba asked as she watched. In fact, Kurama was taken aback by how effortlessly he was defeating Ino. "She's not used to this fashion. Without it, let's see how far I've come." Kurama made the decision to fight exclusively with the techniques taught in the academy. Once more switching up her strategy, Ino led with a gentle punch to the face. The Kyuubi tried to sweep her legs after blocking the punch with a textbook block. As Naruto was getting up from the sweep, Ino hopped a little and kicked him hard. Kurama raised his arms to deflect the blow. Despite being pushed back a few feet, no point was awarded. After exchanging kicks and punches, they both returned together. Even though Kurama had made significant progress in a few weeks, he was still unable to score a point fast. When he responded with the proper block, Ino actually surprised him by feigning a punch to the midsection and transforming it into a grab of his jumpsuit. In order to prevent him from blocking the second punch from her other arm, she dragged him forward and knocked him off balance. The students applauded. They didn't think highly of Naruto, and when he began to lose to his opponent, the world ended. The fox chose to return to the Hokage style in order to silence those cheers. With herself confidence restored, Ino launched into a furious round of punches and kicks. Instead of using the more forceful and direct blocks taught by the academy, Kurama used circular blocks and drifted in and out of the dance at strange angles. Ino quickly discovered that her hands were not where she wanted them to be and that she was powerless to protect herself from a forceful, sharp elbow to her ribs. After Naruto defeated a clan heir in his second spar, Iruka called the match. The way they fought piqued the interest of their teacher. "Congratulations, Naruto. Ino isn't an easy opponent. After the rest of the spars, I'd like to talk to you." "Sure, Iruka. Sensei," Kurama said, giving Iruka one of Naruto's jovial grins. Iruka spoke with Naruto while letting the rest of the class go after the remaining spars. "Naruto, I have a couple of questions for you." "Sure, Iruka." "Sensei, did you see how awesome my spar was? I'm finally getting strong," was Kurama's response once more. Then he said, "Naruto, where did you learn how to fight like that?" After congratulating Naruto. "Oh, Anko. Sensei taught me. She says it's the Hokage style." Startled, Iruka asked more questions and discovered that the Hokage had set up the extra tutoring. Iruka would never doubt the Hokage's intelligence, but Mitarashi had a bad reputation. Nevertheless, the boy's taijutsu appeared to have improved greatly as a result of her training. "One last question, Naruto. Did you deliberately aim for Ino's throat?" Kurama could have responded in a few different ways, but he swiftly went with the more amusing one. The boy's face flushed, and the Chunin watched. Iruka became alarmed when she saw how uneasy the boy appeared. It was risky and completely out of character for Naruto to deal a blow like that to a fellow academy student. Naruto then erupted. "It isn't my fault. I didn't know I was supposed to eat my vegetables." "What?" Iruka inquired, perplexed. "I never ate my vegetables. Gigi told me if ate better I would grow bigger. I was too short to reach her face with my kick because no one told me the bad-tasting food would make me taller." Iruka was chagrined and relieved by Naruto's response. With a laugh, he said, "All right, Naruto, have Anko work on your kicks then. We don't want anyone seriously hurt in a spar." He saw Naruto give the boy a solemn nod before releasing him. Iruka was happy that Naruto was receiving the instruction he required to develop. Ayame and her father's deaths were devastating blows that could have broken the child, who had a difficult life. The way he had treated Naruto during his early years at the academy made him feel a little guilty. "Naruto, stay strong and never lose your childlike spirit." Kurama praised himself for his own ingenuity. He had bought his hook, line, and sinker from the sappy instructor. Anko was waiting for him at the training grounds, so he walked over there casually. "You're a bit late, Runt. Where have you been?" "Iruka." Sensei wanted to know where I got so good at kicking ass. You win another match? Against who? Smiled Anko. Ino Yamanaka. Not bad kid, that's one of the clan heirs. I bet she's in the running for the top kunoichi spot. With a shrug, Kurama exclaimed, I can't wait to take on Sasuke. Teme, before beaming. After working on taijutsu for a while, Anko started teaching Naruto a new set of stretches that would cause his limbs to become more flexible than usual. Kurama grumbled, ow, these hurt, as he thought Naruto would. Yup, and you'll need to keep doing them for the next month or it will all be for nothing. This will allow your body to bend in a way most shinobi can't do. This adds to the confusion of your opponent when your limbs do things that don't appear to be naturally possible. This isn't a Nan no Kaizo, soft physique modification, but it is still incredibly useful. I've never heard of that jutsu before. It was a jutsu that only a select few shinobi used, according to Anko. When muscles were unable to produce the necessary movement, it required body modification, usually accomplished through surgery, followed by training in the use of chakra to move one's limbs. Kurama didn't think much of that kind of path. Since Naruto didn't intend to stay in his host for that long and his body was maturing into adulthood, it wouldn't be feasible. In any case, he would benefit from knowing the stretches given his current fighting style. Anko observed his chakra control as they concluded their training. You still have a lot of work ahead of you kid, but it's gotten a bit better. Reminding Kurama of his shortcomings in that area annoyed him. The boy had so much chakra that it was almost impossible to control. Although there was still time because it had only been a few weeks, Kurama was beginning to lose hope that he would ever be able to use the cursed Bunshin no Jutsu clone technique. When all you had was a huge shovel made for a biju, it was like attempting to add soil to a potted plant. The effect was ruined by too much chakra. I'll keep working on it, but I'm already trying really hard. Hey, maybe you can ask another sensei about any other chakra control techniques that might work better for me? When he noticed the telltale symptoms of Anko becoming agitated, the demon fox chuckled to himself. No genin or academy student would have noticed it because it was so subtle, but Kurama did. The kunoichi with purple hair fought the impulse to harm her young pupil. Although the question seemed harmless enough, she would have sworn the little shit had concealed a purposeful jab in it if she hadn't known any better. Without giving away that she was offended and upset, Anko replied, the chakra training techniques I've given you are all you need. Work harder and be patient. Naruto nodded his head in agreement, and Kurama laughed. I'll keep working on it. Anko made his way to the Hokage tower as Naruto sprinted off to his apartment to continue his training. The village chief wanted to discuss Naruto's training progress with her. Hiruzen smiled at her like a grandfather when he saw Anko walk into his office. Ah, Anko. Thank you for seeing me. I wanted to ask how Naruto-kun's training was progressing. She raised her head slightly and responded, he is doing well. His taijutsu skill has progressed considerably. His conditioning and the better diet you placed him on is helping him start to achieve faster muscle growth. His speed has increased as well. Sensing something more, the Hokage questioned, but he learns very oddly. It takes him some time to master new concepts, which led me to believe he was somewhat mentally deficient. However, once he has mastered something he never does it wrong. Never. Sarutobi's eyebrow went up. I've only ever seen that much precision from Guy, and that is due to grueling hours of training that firmly ingrains every taijutsu move and attack into his muscles. Naruto doesn't seem to need that level of repetition in order to fully master a skill. Interesting, and promising for his career as a shinobi. How is his chakra control? Terrible. He is working on it and there has been some improvement, but the size of his chakra coils is making it difficult for him. Hiruzen concentrated on chakra. Intensive techniques to overwhelm her opponents because she knew Kushina had a similar issue. Will he be able to graduate with his class? Anko shrugged a little. In taijutsu and most ninjutsu he will be fine. His stealth abilities were already impressive before I started. His knowledge base is pitiful, but that's never been important to genin graduates. The only problem he will have is the clone technique. Hiruzen considered the situation while puffing on his pipe. Even though Rock Lee couldn't perform the fundamental 3 academy jutsu, he had just made an exception for him to become a genin. Should he treat Naruto the same way? Naruto threw himself into becoming a powerful shinobi after the tragedy involving Tuchi and Ayame. Under Anko's guidance, he was developing and showed every indication of becoming a skilled shinobi. Would his incapacity to perform a basic bunshin really be the reason he held him back? It would be better to wait and see. Maybe Naruto will surprise us. Well done, Anko. You have demonstrated the abilities needed of a sensei. If Naruto can pass the academy test as well as the genin test, I see no reason why you couldn't be made a full jonin. Anko smiled. Depending on who you asked, the difference between a Jonin and a Tokubetsu Jonin could mean very little or a lot. To achieve the rank, a Tokubetsu Jonin only needed to possess a single Jonin level skill. A complete Jonin needed to be multi-talented. A full Jonin had to be deemed suitable to serve as a sensei over a genin team, which was an extra requirement in Konoha. Ibiki, her direct superior, most likely had the opportunity to become a Jonin, but he never bothered because he had no interest in ever training genin and could care less about people's opinions. But Anko did care what the village thought of her. Although she gave the impression that she didn't care, she secretly wished to show them how wrong they were about her. She wasn't an impending psychotic traitor. She had intriguing hobbies and was a devoted kunoichi of the leaf. Her vindication would be the Jonin rank. Thank you, Hokage. Sama. Hiruzen beckoned her away. He was happy to see Naruto growing. He felt less guilty about the ramen vendor's deaths as a result of it. He had assumed that having a team sent to keep an eye on Naruto would be sufficient. He had never imagined that his own shinobi would be so vicious and spiteful as to target the boy's few friends. As it was, he was now also following Iruka with 2 Anbu. For a moment, he considered placing guards on Anko, but he decided against it because she was more than capable of taking care of herself. He had no problem dangling the Jonin rank in front of her, in part because he had evaluated her abilities. She was firmly at Jonin level in taijutsu. Indeed, the Habi style was a formidable fighting art. He had even lost to his own student who had practiced the style in a straight taijutsu spar. Her ninjutsu wasn't particularly impressive, but it was adequate. Although she was skilled at breaking out of Genjutsu, she rarely used it. Few people could match her in the art of infiltration and stealth. Her familiarity with poisons and how to use them gave potential adversaries yet another unpleasant surprise. And lastly, her status as an elite Jonin could be determined solely by her summoning abilities. Some of the lower-end Jonin could easily defeat some of the larger snakes she could call forth on their own. You two have been mistreated by the village. I'm hoping that by working together, you can expose their errors and strengthen Konoha. Students at the academy were beginning to show Naruto more respect. His proficiency with thrown weapons had improved, as had his taijutsu skills. Because of what their parents had taught them, many of the civilian children still viewed him with disdain, but the clan heirs showed a little more deference. For a few days, Ino's ability to speak loudly was significantly limited due to a bruise on her throat. She was a little more careful not to offend the erratic blonde. Shikamaru watched Naruto when he could be bothered. He had witnessed that kick, which appeared to have been intentional. Naruto questioned whether there was more to the boy than first appeared because that action was inconsistent with his personality. He could have done more than wonder if he had been more driven, but since there had been no recurrences, it was just too problematic to investigate. Shoji's opinion of Naruto had not changed, and he had never had any issues with him. Sasuke had looked at the boy again. He was curious to see how he would fare against the distinctive fighting style he witnessed, and the dead last was displaying some skill. The fact that he would have to wait 2 weeks before he could spar with him disappointed him. Despite finding Naruto's loudness and unpredictable nature annoying, Shino had also never had a problem with him. Around Naruto, Hinata was her shy self as usual, but in spars, she appeared to have gained some confidence as a result of Naruto's abrupt improvement. Kiba, however, responded quite differently. Instead of the deceased last class clown, he now viewed Naruto as a threat in the pack standing. This indicated that he was rapidly turning into a source of trouble for Kurama. He ridiculed him loudly, threw things and blamed Naruto for them, and gave him a hard shoulder when they entered the classroom. Kurama pondered how suspicious it would be if the mutt died of poisoning all of a sudden. He could choose one that he had independently investigated and that Anko hadn't yet shown him. Better not. I would still be suspected. Kiba kept baiting Naruto over the course of the following few days. Kurama made the decision to confront the boy in public, face some repercussions, and maintain the same standards for him in the end. When Kiba shoved him that day as they were entering, Kurama responded by unexpectedly elbowing Kiba in the face. The startled Inuzuka was then thrown into Iruka's desk after he turned and kicked him in the chest. Iruka quickly positioned himself between Kiba, who had leapt up prepared for a fight, and Naruto, who was looking irate. What is the meaning of this? Kiba was glared at by Kurama, who said, "He shoved me." Growling, Kiba said, "You were in the way." Iruka exhaled. "You are both training to be shinobi. You very well may be comrades in the future, act like it." Kiba followed suit, and Kurama walked stiffly back to his desk. "You little doby, hitting me with a surprise attack, next time it will be different," Kiba muttered to himself. Kurama laughed at such naive warnings. He was truly above this. He would wet himself if the cur next to him ever sniffed his actual form. He was furious that the little mortals couldn't be punished for their rudeness. But they will in due time. Kiba somewhat withdrew after Iruka's warning, and the days went by in a constructive manner. He spent a large portion of their training time being drilled on chakra control exercises by Anko. Kurama questioned why she appeared to be so much more driven. Although it wasn't as though she hadn't previously attempted to assist him in controlling his chakras, she now appeared to be more focused on it than on other things. As things were moving slowly, Anko made the decision to try something new. Alright Gaki, I'm going to show you a more advanced technique that typically isn't taught until you have a Jonin sensei outside of the academy. It uses more chakra than the Bunshin, so it might be easier. If you can master it, then maybe it will be easier to work your way down. What is it? You'll be pushing chakra into your feet in order to stick to a tree and actually walk up it. Here, let your amazing instructor demonstrate. After that, Anko walked up the tree in a casual manner. Since he had fought a lot of shinobi during the glorious period when he was allowed to roam freely in his natural form, Kurama was accustomed to them clinging to surfaces. Naruto exclaimed, "Let me try," in a lively tone. As soon as Kurama stepped on the tree, the bark broke off. Big surprise, you put too much chakra into it. It will help if you get a running start and use a minimal amount. Kurama gave a nod and followed through. Before the bark crumbled once more, he ascended 2 steps. He was able to perform a backward flip and land upright rather than slamming into the ground in an undignified manner because of his improved training. Anko observed her pupil try numerous times. She had to give him credit for his perseverance even though he wasn't making much progress. She then noticed that Naruto had paused and was focusing intently on the tree. "What are you doing, short stuff?" Kurama flashed an exaggerated Naruto grin at Anko. "I have an idea." Chakra stirred in the air, Anko sensed. The child's chakra output was significantly higher than what was required for the exercise. Leave the lesson to be misinterpreted by Naruto. It takes finesse, not strength. To her astonishment, Naruto managed to climb half a dozen steps before he faltered. The next time, he took 7 steps. She attempted to decipher his actions. When she noticed his clothes clinging to him, the light bulb went off. Naruto's enormous amount of chakra made these exercises difficult for him. By focusing the chakra on his entire body rather than just his feet, he was reducing the amount of chakra at each specific body part. In fact, it was incredibly ineffective but also quite clever. However, Naruto must have chakra to burn, and after he has it this way, he can begin to refine it even more. "Alright kid, you're getting the hang of it. For the rest of our practice, keep working on this and tomorrow we'll be upping the difficulty." Kurama observed Anko go. He was happy that he had managed to advance in the tree walking exercise. After taking command of the boy's chakra network, he would have the chance to master more complex methods. Since Fuinjutsu is probably the first technique a compromised Jinchuriki would want to learn, it would be suspicious if he asked to learn it. He was incredibly intelligent, and without anyone noticing, he would eventually sway the conversation in that direction. He needed to climb a tree in the interim. As promised, Anko had made things more challenging. She would throw blunted kunai at him with considerable force while he was attempting to use chakra to climb the trees. Running up the tree, he would have to dodge the kunai. Luckily, Kurama was a skilled multitasker. He managed to dodge the kunai without losing control of his chakras. Anko, however, began tossing the kunai with much more force because she didn't want her enjoyment to be ruined. The kunai charged at him faster than most genin, let alone an academy student, could avoid. Naturally, Kurama's superior senses were able to detect them, but even with that added benefit, his body still required improved reflexes to respond. As Naruto repeatedly fell from the tree in an awkward heap due to her blunted kunai, Anko laughed. It was a happy sight to see his expression of pain and frustration. The best part was that she wouldn't be in trouble because Sandaime himself had employed a similar training method on his students. Although it was bothersome, Kurama's pain was insignificant in comparison to his previous suffering. Naruto displayed pain on his face, as would have been expected of him. Additionally, he sensed that Anko was having fun with this training activity. It's funny to watch people suffer, so I can't really blame her. Surprisingly, Kurama had no intention of destroying Midarashi. He had to exercise self-control to refrain from killing the little shits when Kiba or another student irritated him. He felt no resentment when Anko used her blunted kunai to inflict more pain in a single afternoon than Kiba had done during his entire tenure at the academy. How did he feel? Admiration for a kinship mate. She was obviously inferior to him in every way, but for some reason, he wanted to spare her when he destroyed the village for daring to imprison him. They worked on the tree walking exercise, more specifically, the tree running exercise, for the remainder of their training session. He had made significant progress, but at the end of it, he was still unable to reach the top. After forcing him to finish the excruciating stretching exercise, Anko let him go for the remainder of the day. Kurama went back to the apartment and worked on the additional conditioning and his chakra control exercises. Less than a month had passed, but he could already tell that his body was becoming more defined and that he was faster and stronger than when he first took control. He was no longer dead last in the academy rankings. A civilian boy who was wholly unfit for shinobi training had assumed that questionable distinction. Accomplish the academy. Turn into a genin. Start studying fuinjutsu. Turn into a chunin. Find out more about fuinjutsu and focus on it. Become a jonin. Become an expert in seals. Destroy the village of Leaf. Kurama thought to himself, one step at a time. Although patience would be required, he was making good progress thus far. Kurama had started studying under Anko 6 weeks prior. His taijutsu had advanced significantly. His hobby style was very difficult for the academy style to match. Together with his natural advantage and physical development, he was quickly dominating his peers in taijutsu spars. The most recent matchup had the class buzzing today. Sasuke Uchiha versus Naruto Uzumaki. You got a bit better, but you are no match for Sasuke-kun, Sakura yelled at Naruto. Yeah, added Ino. When the yelling interrupted Shikamaru's nap, he simply muttered and rolled his head slightly. Troublesome. Kurama was only slightly concerned about moving too quickly. After all, he was getting 1-on-1 training from a taijutsu expert in a style that nearly perfectly countered the moves taught at the academy. His terrible chakra control didn't need to be faked, and while his academic performance had improved, it was still below par. To be honest, he was excited for the match against the youthful Uchiha. Compared to his prior matches, this would be a more accurate gauge of how much his host's body had improved. After calming the class down, Mizuki and Iruka began sparring with Naruto and Sasuke. Sasuke was excited for the battle as well. He had hardly been challenged, and the academy had been dull. In their taijutsu matches, the Inuzuka was the only one with any ferocity, but he was easily tricked. Last but not least, the dead had received additional training and could prove to be difficult. Kurama started the fight by moving steadily forward and then kicking quickly at a much faster pace. Sasuke was able to knock the limb aside and counter with a lightning fast barrage of punches, indicating that he had either not been duped or that his reflexes were simply that good. Naruto deflected all of the blows by bending, twisting, and blocking the class. The Uchiha's advance was obviously frustrated by the unexpected ways his body was moving. However, Kurama was also unable to mount a strong defense. Sasuke was simply quicker. I haven't been able to increase this body's speed much in 6 weeks. Sasuke leapt over Kurama's leg as he tried an unexpected leg sweep after rolling under a high kick. Kurama saw a chance because the Uchiha was in the air. He was able to rise and charge towards Sasuke faster than usual by channeling chakra into the soles of his feet. The chakra push shattered the earth surrounding his launching point. The move caught Sasuke off guard, but he swiftly blocked the blow and delivered a kick in midair that struck the rising Naruto in the stomach and sent him landing hard on the ground. Sasuke gets a point. Kurama leapt to his feet again. The fact that the boy with the raven hair was faster and stronger than he was infuriated him. He could easily kill him, the other students, and the Chunin teachers if he used even a small portion of his power. But if he did that, the old man would be alerted, and he would eventually be sealed again even if he took half the village with him. Instead, he resisted the impulse to destroy everyone in his vicinity and raised his defenses. Yeah, get him, Sasuke-kun. If you beat him I'll give you a kiss, exclaimed Amy, another of Sasuke's fangirls. Sakura and Ino snarled at the girl with the purple hair, but they quickly returned to their taijutsu spar and resumed their fight. Mizuki observed, a little amazed by the maneuvers. Both of them were engaged in upper genin combat. Not 10 months before graduation, he would anticipate seeing a match like this in the Chunin exams. Sasuke moved slowly forward and used a few light punches and kicks with little force to test Naruto's defenses. Kurama deftly returned every blow, but he stayed on the defensive and kept his limbs close to his body. When Sasuke finally had enough of being probed, he charged in with a forceful blow to the face, which Kurama sidestepped by sliding perpendicular to the impact. He retaliated with an elbow to the face, but Uchiha, who was quick, caught the blow in his palm and gave him a forceful shove back. Kurama lost his balance due to the unexpected strength, leaving him vulnerable. Though his eyes could see the attack coming, it was likely similar to what a Sharingan wielder saw against an opponent who was moving too quickly for his body to keep up. More perceptual than anyone without a dojutsu was Kurama. The fast snap kick was coming at him, and he knew immediately that he would not be able to stop it. As the ostracized child fell from the forceful blow, the children applauded as the kick made contact. As the point was called, Kurama stood up. Naruto refused to give up, so Kurama had to make it look good even though he knew it was hopeless. Arg Sasuke. Teme, I am going to beat you, believe it. Naruto charged forward with hardly any indication of an attack plan, and Sasuke snorted. Following a few brief exchanges, Sasuke delivered a blow to Naruto's ribs that ended the match after Naruto launched an attack that went too far. Naruto, good try. Just make sure you keep your cool. In the last round you were pretty erratic, Iruka said, giving him a shoulder pat. Kurama snarled to himself while putting on a dejected and irritated front for the teacher. You blind fool, I'll tear your eyes out. For the time being, Uchiha has the advantage of having a better body, but that is just a short-term disadvantage. Anko continued training. In the area of chakra control, tree walking had been somewhat beneficial, and Kurama could now spar against his sensei while perched on a tree. Mitarashi was pleased with Naruto's development in taijutsu, poison, and thrown weapons. As she became more at ease with the boy, she began to make the lessons a little more unpleasant because she was so frustrated by his inability to get the bunshin down. Naturally, all in the name of training. Although Kurama was sensitive to pain, he had long since grown numb to its consequences. Bruises seemed insignificant when you had the sensation of spikes pinning your limbs down. However, Anko was unaware of this, so he had to act as though the pain made him want to work harder. Then, Anko added trap creation and detection to the curriculum. Prior to the possession, Naruto had been quite inventive in his use of trap making for pranks, and the fundamentals had been taught in the academy. Nonetheless, the kunoichi had brought in a number of novel ideas that made trap killing incredibly simple. It's almost too simple. The right poison could cause the victim to die within a minute, but a simple makibishi could slow down the pursuit. All it took to remove someone from the battle when poisoning was a simple scratch. It was astonishing that any shinobi ever dared leave their home, especially considering the various ways to conceal triggers. Of course, the stronger shinobi were very good at spotting things. Clearly, that lesson was learned. Be mindful of your surroundings at all times. However, when Anko talked about how to combat them, Kurama's near awe of poisons did take a hit. Alright kid, I've shown you how deadly poison can be. Now that you have respect for them, I'll go over how to neutralize them before you croak. Kurama awaited more explanations from Anko. Outside of the obvious, such as not getting hit by a poisoned weapon or inhaling poisonous gas, there are three main ways to counter a poison user. She raised her index finger. The first is to develop immunity to certain poisons by getting your body to slowly tolerate small doses of it. The fact that we are ninja makes it easier than the poor civilian saps. Our chakra helps the tolerance process. This is also why shinobi have to drink really strong liquor to get inebriated. Kurama paid close attention. He needed anything that could keep his body intact until he figured out how to defeat the sealing arts. But Anko, didn't you say there were hundreds of poisons? How would anyone be able to build a tolerance for them all? Got it in one gaki. Developing a tolerance for the commonly used poisons is typically what is done. The more exotic types become more difficult since their rarity means it's hard to get a supply in the first place, and even if you did, what are the odds you would encounter a shinobi using it? Anko gestured for Naruto to follow her as she ascended a tree. He could be improving his chakra control instead of wasting time listening to her lecture. The second way to counteract poisons is learn Dokusei Kiyomeru no Jutsu, poison cleanse technique. This is the next jutsu I will teach you. You flood your tenketsu points with chakra and have it circle through your chakra network. When done correctly, most poisons can be drawn into the network and then expelled through your pores. Kurama was now a little agitated. What was the point of studying poison combinations that were so wonderfully diabolical if they could all be fixed with a simple jutsu? He pushed more chakra into his feet than was necessary, causing the bark to explode with minimal acting. He touched down and pointed angrily up at Anko. Why did you make me study all those poisons? What a waste of time. Grinning, Anko sat down beside her pupil. Lots of reasons, you ungrateful brat. Most genin don't learn that jutsu in the first place. It's typically learned once a shinobi reaches the rank of chunin. Secondly, it takes a bit of time to work depending on how good you are with the technique. In the middle of the fight it's going to be difficult to use while still fighting. And finally, you twit, it doesn't work on all poisons. Kurama was pacified a little. When he considered it, he realized that poison would still give him a significant fighting advantage, and that many poisons would act in a matter of seconds, which would not be enough time to employ the technique in the first place. With a mumble, "Sorry, Anko. Sensei," in order to combat poison in the field, Anko proceeded to the third method. Antidotes via injections or pills are the final way. Typically, if you know the type of poison an enemy will use, the local medical nin can have an antidote prepared. Alternatively, there are generic antidotes that deal with the most common poisons. As part of the standard Chunin gear, you get 3 of them. For the most part, the generic catch-alls are rubbish against skilled poison users but fairly effective against amateurs. She gave Naruto 3 pills to take on his own, just in case you prick yourself while practicing applying poison to your weapons. Kurama took the capsules and placed them in one of his jumpsuit's pouches. Anko grinned evilly and said, "Now let's start getting your body acclimated to some of the poisons frequently used in Hai no Kuni." She rushed forward and jammed a senbon into Naruto's shoulder with a speed that no genin, much less an academy student, could match. Kurama experienced a sudden, intense pain as the poison began to seep into the tissue around his shoulder. He forced Naruto to cry out in agony, and there was some sincerity in it as well. The poison was painful. His whole arm seemed to be on fire. This little poison is typically used in interrogations as opposed to fieldwork, but in a pinch it works fairly well. It's obtained from a plant found only in Hai no Kuni called fire thistle. The effect agitates the nerves quite severely, mimicking a burning sensation. It also makes the poisoned area shake, causing the infected enemy to be unable to hold weapons or use hand signs. This feeling didn't sit well with Kurama. He screamed in agony again as he felt the toxin completely grasp his arm because he thought Naruto would handle it much worse. As her student gripped his arm, Anko watched with amusement. The child's ability to grit his teeth and try not to cry out again impressed her, but this poison was no joke. He grunted in agony again, and she smiled. "So my little Gaki, I've gotten you up to speed for the academy. Hell, you'd be fine against most baby-faced genin. So our time is done unless you have the balls to stick with my training plan." Kurama gave his sensei a menacing narrow of the eyes. He could easily put up with a few bruises, but this was nothing compared to the agony he endured while imprisoned in Kushina. "Those generic antidotes will actually fix you right up in just a few minutes, but if you take one, then I'm done being your sensei." The student was now writhing on the ground, and Anko looked down at him. Kurama's decision was clear. A Jonin's individualized instruction would be better than anything he could accomplish alone. Yes, he would become stronger on his own, of course, but not as fast as he would be trained by Anko. "I'll never give up, believe it," the apprentice of Orochimaru laughed. "I love your spirit, kid, and just so you aren't tempted, let's make sure you can't go back on your word." Kurama was horrified to see Anko drive a second senbon coated in the same substance into his other shoulder. His nervous system danced with a new wave of burning fire. "You can take one of your capsules after the shaking in your hands subsides in about 45 minutes, but if you do, we're done. If you can endure the pain, it will subside in a few hours." Kurama trembled with pain and rage. How dare this girl bring him to this point? He could tear her to pieces in a heartbeat and teach her the true meaning of suffering, and she would be completely unaware of how close she was to being obliterated. He was the Kyuubi no Yoko, and he would not submit to something as insignificant as pain, so he would be damned if he failed this test. "What is that, brat? Say something. I already told you that I would never give up, so screw you. I will become stronger in order to defend others." In the end, Anko didn't know why she did it, but she wanted to win him over. She had intended to give him 2 doses of the toxin, but that was it. She did have a semblance of decency left after all. Perhaps she just wanted to break the stubborn brat. Perhaps she just liked the idea of him going through even more agony. Perhaps she was sick of wasting her afternoons. Rather, she removed the vial and sprayed another senbon, tossing it carelessly at his leg before removing another and throwing it at the other leg. As fire engulfed the boy's entire nervous system, a scream was torn from Naruto's throat. The kunoichi waved cheekily at him before using the body flicker technique to vanish. The 4 Anbu looked at each other and debated whether they should do anything, but since they were elite and knew the poison wasn't deadly, they shrugged and decided to do nothing for the time being and report the incident to the Hokage later. Kurama shuddered, feeling as though he was literally on fire, and the sobs and screams that came out of Naruto's mouth were only partially fake. He would not be defeated by a simple poison, and he would not allow the snake bitch to win one over to him. Kurama snarled and arched his host's back. Twice he nearly escaped the confines of his host body, but he repelled the urge with the strength of his pride. The temptation was greater here because giving in would simply mean he was out a sensei, whereas previously it would have meant revealing himself as the Kyuubi and likely being sealed again. Minute after minute went by until at last his right arm stopped shaking, and he could now take the antidote and put an end to the suffering if he so desired. He had done it, and he lay there enjoying the sensation of his nerves not being soaked in molten lava. However, pride and self-interest returned, and he realized that having a specialized instructor would be extremely helpful if he wanted to advance through the ranks quickly. The pain didn't go away until the very last few minutes, and then it gradually subsided. After a good amount of time, he painfully got up and walked back to the apartment. The Sandaime felt enraged. "Are you crazy?" His harsh words were barely audible above a whisper. The Hokage was clearly angry, and Anko could sense the murderous intent radiating from him. "My apologies, I was trying to test if he had what it takes to continue." A hand slammed against Sarutobi's desk. "Don't even begin. It is unacceptable to demand a test similar to the one taken by academy students. My sensei did the same." "Don't start," I said. "Back then, you were a chunin. Furthermore, do you honestly believe that equating yourself with Orochimaru will benefit you in this situation?" After Orochimaru's defection, the man could have easily washed his hands of her. She knew several who had advised him to do so, but instead he stood up for her and let her continue serving Konoha, so the Kunoichi decided it was time to keep quiet. She had rarely seen the Hokage so furious. Hiruzen inhaled deeply. "He was tortured for 3 hours by you. I've read the T&I reports, and occasionally there are even jonin who take a break from that kind of treatment. And he's not even a shinobi. This is a boy. An academy student. They would be demanding your head if this had been a child from one of the clans." Anko knew the old man's eyes were on her even as she looked down, considering what to do with her because she had made a huge mistake. "Speak, and no more excuses." "I realize what I did was wrong," she said, looking up. "That Naruto passed the test is all I have to say. Passed a more difficult test than the one I took during my apprenticeship with Orochimaru. Teme. He has merited the benefit of my ongoing instruction. If you want, punish me, but don't take that away from me." The professor, as he was called, eyed her. "Very smart, Anko. Very smart indeed." Her words did have merit, and he wasn't going to discard a shinobi of her caliber. Naruto had endured a great deal for the chance to continue his training. "Excellent. You can keep training him. You will still face consequences for your behavior, though. You will not be compensated for training him. For the next 6 months, you will also have to finish one D rank mission every day." Dismissed. After leaving the Hokage's presence, Anko exhaled a sigh of relief because it could have been much worse. Mistreatment of a student could result in dismissal, demotion, or even death, and it was worse because the academy student was not yet legally an adult. Yes, she had been lucky. She suspected it was residual guilt over the Hokage's apprentice placing the cursed seal on her. She would hate doing the D-ranked missions and the loss of pay hurt, but in the end she still had her position and wouldn't have to spend any time in confinement. She couldn't even claim that she was trying to get him used to the poison, since that type of training involved a smaller than normal dose, so the effect wasn't full blown. Kurama went to the academy the following day as if nothing had occurred. As usual, he also went to the training ground. Anko was waiting for him there. "You impressed me, kid, and that isn't something I say very often." It would be significant if Kurama were truly Naruto. But the kind words of ordinary people didn't matter to him. They served as a means. "I'll agree to be your sensei until your next graduation test. We'll continue working on the Habi style, poisons, infiltration, trap detection, chakra control, and I'll be throwing in a few jutsu for you too. Sound good?" Kurama gave a nod. He ensured that his stance was rigid and somewhat antagonistic. After being practically tortured for 3 hours, he assumed Naruto would be more than a little agitated. The two returned to their work with a heavy burden from the previous day, but they didn't discuss it further. In retaliation, Anko chose to be comparatively kind today, and the day was successful. She gave Naruto a vial near the end. "This is the toxin created from the fire thistle. I've diluted it with water so it only has 1/10 the potency that you felt yesterday. Use it daily and in a few weeks your nerves will become accustomed to its presence. I'll give you a higher dosage and in a month or two you'll be completely immune." Even though Kurama didn't think she was lying, he still reacted cautiously. "Are you sure? Or is this another test?" With a forced smile, Anko said, "No tests, not for a while at least. You just passed a damn tough one." Kurama accepted the vial after nodding. After 4 months of training together, Kurama had become an expert in Kiyomeru no Jutsu, also known as the poison cleanse technique. He also had some toxins made to lace them with and was reasonably accurate with senbon. One was a straightforward paralytic that numbed the area that was struck, another was made from fire thistle, and the last was a tranquilizer that, if the senbon hit a blood vessel correctly, could render an opponent unconscious. Kurama's strength and speed had also increased. His improved diet and exercise were paying off. The gap had narrowed, but the Uchiha was still faster in terms of raw speed. He had scored a point in their previous spar before Sasuke prevailed. This resulted in a fun encounter in which Sasuke insisted on having his own Jonin teacher. Iruka had stated that he would have to find a Jonin instructor on his own if he wanted one, as the academy did not have any on staff. Since those who enjoyed teaching already had Genin teams and those who didn't were about to start, it ended up being a disappointing catchpoint 2-2 for the Uchiha. It had ignited a fire within Sasuke, and he intensified his efforts even though he was already exerting a lot of effort in his own training. He was training if he wasn't eating or sleeping at the academy. After all, the one-time Dobi was a fool, so Sasuke remained certain that he was a superior shinobi. Furthermore, he could use more than just taijutsu. Like all decent young Uchiha, he had studied ninjutsu. However, he also didn't know about Naruto's powers. Anko kept her promise. She taught him some more jutsu after teaching Naruto Kiyomeru no Jutsu, Poison Cleanse Technique. Shunshin no Jutsu, Body Flicker Technique, was the first. The method allowed a shinobi to move 2 or 3 times faster than usual in a certain direction by using chakra as momentum. Unless you had exceptional chakra control, it wasn't very helpful in battle, but it was a good escape move if you had a moment to spare, and it definitely sped up short distance travel. An advanced version of Nawanuke no Jutsu, Rope Escape Technique, was the next jutsu to be taught. It combined using one's chakra to slide out of restraints with the innate flexibility required to fully utilize the Hokage style. It would be extremely challenging to hold him captive if he were ever apprehended. Although shinobi battles didn't frequently involve this, Anko felt it was wrong to not teach him the Hokage style because it worked so well with it. Additionally, Kurama developed immunity to the straightforward paralytic poison he employed, and he was currently attempting to develop immunity to one of the more deadly poisons that were widely used during the Third Shinobi World War. It was slow because the dosage needed to be extremely diluted to prevent death, and Kurama would have been very annoyed by that. The nine-tailed fox believed that everything was going pretty well. He was aware that he and Sasuke were both easily above Genin level in terms of ability based on his observations and the instructor's remarks. The majority of new Genin were proficient in the Academy Taijutsu style, knew the Fundamental Academy 3, and, if they were clan children, had clan jutsu as a backup. Since they had no one to teach them other jutsu until they graduated, civilians tended to concentrate on taijutsu or bukajutsu. Additionally, he was at last improving his fundamental bunshin jutsu. His clones were able to sustain themselves for longer than a few seconds, even though he had not been able to create it to the Academy's standards. Though it was an improvement, they still didn't look right. Although he continued to use excessive amounts of chakra, Kurama made up for it by producing far more bunshin than was required. He was able to produce 50 of the grotesquely realistic clones at this point. He was making headway and his chakra control was getting better. Yes, things were going quite well. Alongside her friend Kurenai, Anko was savoring her delectable dango. Please don't ask me again, it's embarrassing. Kurenai couldn't resist grinning at her companion. For some time, the tough.as Nails torture and interrogation specialist had been performing D ranks daily. Many shinobi wanted to know why. Has she lost a wager? Did she have little money? They wondered what was happening. Anko, they keep asking me and now I'm dying to know myself. Anko gave her friend a fierce look. They had a fascinating relationship. At first glance, it seemed that the two of them had little in common. Kurenai was classy, and Anko was anything but. Kurenai was always calm and appropriate, but Anko loved to make people uncomfortable by saying offensive things or using her position to threaten people. However, the two of them clicked, and it gave Anko a much-needed outlet to regularly speak to someone in a normal way. Before she began training Naruto, she had little human interaction outside of torturing her victims, making people uncomfortable, and reporting to her boss. It really isn't anyone's business. Kurenai raised an eyebrow and gave her friend a fixed look. Okay, but only if you pick up the tab, Anko grunted. The red-eyed Kunoichi nodded and listened to something especially enticing. You know I've been training the Uzumaki kid, right? Well, I got a bit rough with him during training and the Hokage is making me do these stupid D-rank missions. Kurenai felt a little let down. Was that it? She tried to support her because she also wanted to be a good friend. Too rough. Hokage Sama should have known you weren't going to be very gentle with any student. That really seems unfair to make you do so many D-rank missions. Anko's insides twisted slightly. Kurenai did not comprehend her at all, but she liked having a friend in the village's ninja ranks. She was unaware of the extent to which she needed and enjoyed her work at T&I. She would most likely be too repulsed to even sit at the same table as her if she knew. Yeah, well, the old man has a soft spot for the kid and the village treats him like they treat me, so I'm not going to complain about it. Anko didn't want to consider it or the deception she was practicing by omission. Anyway, I'd appreciate it if you didn't tell anyone. Now tell me more about the Hokage's son. You said he couldn't keep his eyes off of you after that last mission, right? Anko congratulated herself on successfully diverting the conversation away from herself as Kurenai blushed. Alright brat, since you are getting the hang of chakra control, I'm going to teach you another important shinobi skill. Kurama was jumping around. Am I going to learn how to breathe fire? Maybe teleport like the Undaime, or are you going to show me a really cool new poison? Anko's smile wavered slightly. She frequently forgot that he was only 11 years old and extremely impulsive because he was such a diligent student and a tiny perfectionist. I'm going to teach you how to defend yourself against Genjutsu. Naruto was excited on the inside, but Kurama made his face look disappointed. Genjutsu had used the Sharingan to control him. One had to start somewhere, even though the Sharingan developed a Genjutsu that was much more dangerous and challenging to break than a standard Genjutsu. Look brat, no matter how good you are, a simple Genjutsu can mean your death on the battlefield, so pay attention. Kurama nodded solemnly, ceasing to play around. Alright, there are two parts to dealing with Genjutsu. The first is realizing you are in one. If you don't realize you are in one, you'll never even try to break out of one. The second part should be obvious, how to break out of a Genjutsu. Almost without warning, Anko drew a kunai and threw it at Naruto. Kurama turned to the left, allowing the kunai to fly past him as he saw it approaching. Why did you do that? Keeping you on your toes. When you get that focused look, it makes me think you've dropped your situational awareness. Although Kurama assumed it was a crucial lesson, a Biju didn't need to learn it because his senses weren't just physical. The best way to know if you are in a Genjutsu is to constantly be aware of your surroundings. Most Genjutsu cannot fool all 5 of your senses. It takes too much chakra and precise control. A lot of them do trick your eyes and your ears, but depending on the skill of the wielder, there may be inconsistencies. So if something changes for no reason, I might be in a Genjutsu? She asked, observing Naruto squint at her. Got it, in one, Anko said, snapping her fingers. We'll be working on your Genjutsu detection for the next few weeks, but I'll go ahead and explain how to break out of one. The first method requires a decent amount of chakra control. Chakra constantly flows throughout your body. You can temporarily stop the flow and then immediately create a burst of chakra that will disrupt the Genjutsu. Ah, Anko. Sensei, why does everything go back to chakra control? The snake mistress of Konoha twitched. What causes everything to return to the chakra? Because that's what separates a shinobi from a normal soldier. You little fool. They cannot shape chakra, we can. She didn't say anything about those ideas, rather she said, hey kid, I don't make the rules, I just explain them. Now, you are going to close your eyes and at random intervals I'll put you in a mild training Genjutsu that will make you see things despite the fact that your eyes are closed. Once you get used to feeling how your chakra is different, then we'll do something a bit more interesting. Anko applied a training Genjutsu to Kurama after he closed his eyes. He saw a fake image after her chakra entered his chakra network. The picture, which depicted the clearing they were in, was actually taken from the real world. Feel your chakra, can you sense a difference? Although he wasn't certain Naruto would, Kurama could. To the best of his knowledge, Naruto had never experienced Genjutsu. The normal response was uncertain, so he chose uncertainty and furrowed his forehead. Maybe? I feel like something is off, but I'm not sure what. The Genjutsu was released by Anko. Open your eyes and tell me 10 things that were different than the Genjutsu. Kurama looked around after opening his eyes. Although the Genjutsu had been realistic, some details were lacking. For starters, Anko was roughly 2 feet to the left of her intended location. Second, compared to the Genjutsu, there were more trees in the real world. Thirdly, Kurama was able to identify far more than 10 with his superior demonic senses. It's better to play a little dense. Well, there are more trees and other clouds were different? With narrowed eyes, Anko said, don't guess. The kunoichi with purple hair observed Naruto straining to think of something. This is a lesson you should have already learned. Be aware of your surroundings. Almost no Genjutsu is absolutely perfect. Partially because the opponent's perspective is different than your own. You need to be able to spot the tiniest details that are off. Otherwise, a subtle Genjutsu will get you killed far more easily than the more elaborate ones. What do you mean? Deflect the senbon I throw at you, Naruto. Kurama felt her chakra enter Naruto's own network once more as Anko sealed her hand. Then, with 2 senbon aimed at his shoulder, his sensei sent them at him. Deflecting the 2, He raised his kunai with ease. Because Anko only used visual genjutsu, he was aware of the third one. He could actually hear the air being released as the senbon sailed through it thanks to his biju senses. But since Naruto would not be able to use those senses, he allowed the third invisible senbon to strike his arm. Ow! Where did that one come from? I created a genjutsu. This one was different from the training genjutsu as I didn't recreate the world and force the image into the eyes. I merely made one small segment of the world invisible, effectively creating a blind spot. If you aren't aware of your surroundings and you don't feel the chakra tendril interact with your network in an instant, you can be killed. Kurama had to concede that Anko was a very good sensei. Any student would be inspired by the realistic example of a real life situation. Now you see why this is important, Gaki. Be aware of your surroundings and be aware of your own internal chakra network. That's a twofold defense. We'll be practicing both during each of our practice sessions. Okay, but can you show me how to break it now? Anko held back a sigh. Learning how to break it is useless unless you know how to detect it. The faster you get it, the faster we can move on to how to counter a genjutsu. Kurama knew that Anko would be irritated, so he made an angry face with his host's face. Oh, this never gets old. Desperately hoping that there was someone back at T&I headquarters that she could torture, Anko forced a smile onto her own face. The nine-tailed fox had been learning from Anko for 6 months at this point. Naruto's body had been nearly entirely rebuilt by then. He was stronger, quicker, and much more nimble. He was starting to become a true master of the Hokage style of taijutsu. His sensei had begun teaching him more sophisticated moves that, just by the way his muscles moved and the angle at which he attacked, made opponents believe that an attack was coming from a certain direction. The taijutsu style's highlights included misdirection, brutal attacks on the body's weak spots, and varying speeds. Some of the moves were practiced during training sessions even though they wouldn't be suitable for use in a schoolyard spar. Kicks to the temple, fingers jabbed into a pressure point, elbows to the back of the neck, and knife hands to the throat were all intended to kill or incapacitate a target. The taijutsu style also had the advantage of being effective against opponents brandishing weapons like tantos or katanas. Many taijutsu styles struggled to defeat opponents with swords, but the Hokage style's peculiar movements and remarkable adaptability made it possible for the practitioner to still be extremely deadly to an armed adversary. Taijutsu was a mainstay, but during the past 2 months, Genjutsu awareness and internalized awareness of the chakra network have been the main focus. If Kurama were to be honest with himself, he would admit that he struggled to identify when someone else's chakra was entering the network. Even though he was superior to a genin or a snotty academy, he found anything less than perfection annoying. He guessed it was because the chakra network wasn't really his own. Anko dismissed it as a result of Naruto's enormous chakra reserves, which made it hard to identify the tiny amounts of chakra in his system. According to Kurama, it might be both. Nevertheless, he was gradually letting more and more of his capacity to observe everything in almost perfect detail emerge. At first, it was slow, but he soon disclosed that he could identify the majority of genjutsu by their subtle variations from reality. After being pleased with the development, Anko proceeded to teach him how to break a genjutsu. Kurama had a huge advantage in this situation. Foreign chakra would be easily driven out by the flush of his enormous chakra reserves. Genjutsu Kai, Genjutsu Dissipation, could easily defeat every genjutsu in Anko's repertoire. The snake summoner hadn't invited her friend over, but she was interested in how well Naruto's skill would work against a genjutsu expert like Kurenai. Kurenai didn't want to disrupt her training schedule because she was working hard to get ready for the impending Jonin assessment. In any event, he didn't need to be able to defeat high-level genjutsu with his genjutsu dispersal ability. Just as it wouldn't be reasonable to expect someone that age to be able to handle a Jonin taijutsu encounter, it wasn't reasonable to expect a genin or academy student to be able to disperse such a potent technique. She was pleased with the development of Genjutsu Kai, Genjutsu Dissipation, and took great pride in demonstrating the second method of dissipating a genjutsu, which involved pain. Seeing him poke his own nerves with his senbon needles was pretty amusing. It also worked pretty well, but they practiced a lot to make sure he did it correctly. Although a kunai could be used in an emergency, the senbon was far more effective and less harmful. After addressing that, the conversation moved on to the next topic. Mitarashi was taken aback by his rapid mastery. The child would grow up to be an amazing shinobi, as long as he didn't make a completely foolish mistake, which he frequently did when he was learning something new. However, once he mastered something, it worked every time. Even in the best case scenario, he had already surpassed the learning curriculum she had anticipated. Well, I suppose it's time to give the little runt a more sophisticated jutsu technique as a reward. Nor will he be a runt for long. I'm glad his taijutsu timing wasn't affected by that last growth spurt, which was pretty amazing. After training, Naruto met his sensei as usual, and this time, Anko was beaming broadly. Your incredible and sexy sensei is now going to reward you for being such a diligent little worker. Kurama made Naruto laugh. Yada. Are you going to teach me a super cool jutsu? Maybe how to breathe fire? I really want to know how to do that. What's up with him exhaling flames? Anko was compelled to play with him. A new jutsu? Really? No, I was going to treat you to some dango? Naruto's expression fell in disappointment as a result of Kurama's actions, but he could now read Anko's apparently erratic moods with ease. He was pleased that she was lying. It was always fun to learn new ways to kill people. Anko continued with a grin, kidding Gaki, you'll be learning a jutsu but it isn't going to be easy. This is a B-rank ninjutsu that with your chakra control you really have no business learning. Then why am I learning it, Anko? Sensei, because it fits with what I've taught you before, and with your body becoming acclimated to your paralytic poison I'm going to show you a new delivery system. Kurama paid close attention. It's called Dokugiri, poison mist, and it's actually a very flexible technique. Typically the person who uses this ninjutsu is an Iryo.nin, medical nin. Because of the complexity and the risk of poisoning yourself. Let me show you how it works. Anko took a breath and exhaled a purplish cloud of smoke. It spread out to a diameter of 20 feet. Which was much more air than any one person could possibly hold in their lungs. The poison that you breathe out is up to you. Normally in combat this is a lethal poison where one inhalation will kill your opponent, however anything that concentrated and lethal could kill or harm you as well. Using supreme chakra control, a medical nin will create a chemical reaction within their lungs and coat said lungs with a thin layer of chakra. They then constantly and rapidly refill their lungs while they exhale. A single misstep and they die. This caused Kurama to blink in reaction. That sounded extremely risky and complicated. Of course a medical nin is used to life and death situations where absolute chakra control is needed. Obviously this isn't suited for you at all, but I'm still going to teach it to you. You're going to cheat. Cheat? Yup. You'll be skipping the most dangerous and important step, the coating of your lungs, airways and mouth with your chakra. Your developed immunity allows you to safely inhale the gaseous version of your liquid paralytic. Kurama recognized the trick's ingenuity. He could concentrate on metabolizing his chakra into the paralyzing haze and then exhaling it, eliminating the need to divide his attention with another task. That still sounded really challenging. And in the future, if you ever actually get good with chakra control, you can always learn to create additional types of poisons. The training started between the two. It would be an understatement to say it was challenging. Chakra manipulation is not the same as intellectually understanding how a process is carried out. Kurama had done little more than pass gas uncontrollably on their first day of work on it. This was extremely funny to Anko, and Kurama became irritated. Being unable to control the body he was gradually taming and transforming into a weapon was something he detested. His new levels of chakra control would be put to the test in the coming weeks. Additionally, he was scheduled to spar with Sasuke again at the academy. Rising from dead last to the top of the academy might attract unwanted attention, but Kurama was sure he could now defeat the boy. In his mind, it was a fine balancing act. He didn't want people to become overly suspicious, but he did want them to think Naruto was deserving so that more training opportunities and rank advancement would arise. For the time being, I'll let the Uchiha brat win. But I'll tear those damned eyes out one day. Following the terrible tragedy, Hinata had ceased stalking Naruto. His personality had changed since the passing of his few friends, and that was part of it. His attitude was different, but he was still Naruto. His carefree and boisterous demeanor had changed. The boy was no longer the class clown and no longer played practical jokes. There were times when his former self came through, but it was as if he were seeing someone else. The change did have some advantages. She had observed that he had an easier time getting food from the vendors. Perhaps they were sorry for him. In any case, the change in his diet had made him taller and more muscular, which her eyes greatly recognized. As if someone could sense those sexual thoughts somehow, she blushed at the thought and nervously pressed her fingers together. Hinata had drawn strength from Naruto's own example, which he set. Even though she was improving in her taijutsu spars, her father wasn't satisfied. And she was more perplexed than ever after witnessing Naruto's effortless victory over Kiba in the sparring ring. She still felt a sense of desire and longing. Was it love, though? Anko had been training for 3 more months. Kurama was getting better. He had progressed to water walking after learning Dokugiri, poison mist, with success. The enormous reserves of Naruto's chakra still hindered his use of it. Much to Anko's amusement, he had been soaking wet for many days. As his understanding of poisons increased, he discovered that creating one's own lethal concoction was the real art of poisoning, not simply replicating what others had already used. Akasuna no Sasori of the Red Sand, gained notoriety for developing a poison for which there was no known remedy. Once the nine-tailed fox had someone to teach him Fuinjutsu, the intellectually stimulating art would be nothing more than a distraction. He kept learning the nuances of the sophisticated Habi-style moves in the interim. In pure taijutsu, he regarded himself as firmly at the Chunin level. He was still satisfied with Anko's guidance after learning several practical jutsu techniques. Anko was eager to have even more fun with her student. She was going to teach him about killing intent today. Enough killing intent had been known to cause civilians to faint or contaminate themselves. Lesser-ranked shinobi have been known to freeze in fear when the disparity in strength and mental toughness was sufficiently great, and there have been a few noteworthy instances where enemy shinobi have even committed suicide to escape the death-related visions. Although it wasn't a genjutsu, it could perform tricks when the mind was forced to do so. It goes without saying that Anko would enjoy frightening the small gaki. It was a legitimate skill to get used to killing intent, and the Hokage couldn't punish her for frightening her student to death. She waited for Naruto to conclude his day at the academy, rubbing her hands eagerly. Ah, and he's there. It's going to be a lot of fun. She saw Naruto pause and put his belongings down. As she had taught him, his gaze wandered across the training field. What are you going to show me today, Anko, sensei? Anko was beaming. I'm going to show a particularly fun technique, but before you learn how to wield it you need to learn how to resist it. Kurama was aware that his sensei's smile was sincere, indicating that she intended to do something that would cause him pain. He was correct. Anko abruptly let loose her full power-killing intent. It was a match for almost every Jonin in the village, having been trained by Orochimaru and Ibiki. The nine-tailed fox had grown accustomed to killing. Like a biju, no mortal could unleash the waves of hatred and desire to kill. He was aware of Anko's expectation that Naruto would freeze in fear, perhaps even cry or faint. Even though he was a master of deception, he chose to enjoy provoking his sensei instead. His expression remained neutral as he gazed at her. I don't think I'm in a genjutsu, but you're staring really hard at me. Are you going to show me the technique or what? Anko gazed in wonder at Naruto. She had conveyed enough intent to kill to make Chunin shudder and seasoned genin flinch. At the very least, another Jonin would have sensed it and responded. And it didn't seem like this little brat could even feel it. How can this be? Could it be that he was born on the night that the Kyuubi was let loose? Or is it a result of his Jinchuriki status? The little shit always spoils my fun, damn it. Anko's ears were emitting steam, which Kurama could almost see. It was a good thing his control was what it was, otherwise he probably couldn't help but laugh at the sheer frustration in Anko's eyes. Anko's voice was cut short. Never mind. You possess a rare ability to be completely oblivious when it comes to killing intent. That's great. Happy for you. Now let's spar. As Anko continued to beat the living daylights out of Naruto and drop the kid gloves, Kurama chuckled to himself. Her attacks were more vicious than usual, and the jab between the legs was unnecessary, but nothing she did was fatal or would cause any long-term harm. After 2 hours of sparring, he was quite sore and bruised, and Anko assisted him in standing up. Not bad, Gaki. Your stamina was always great, but you kept up with me and maintained your chakra control throughout the entire fight. You're going to crush the competition when you get signed up for your first Chunin exam. Believe it, and then I'm going to be a Jonin, and then I'll finally be strong enough. Just remember, kid, there is always someone stronger out there. No, Mitarashi, there isn't. I will be unmatched once I figure out how to defend myself against Fuinjutsu and the Genjutsu skills of the despised Sharingan. I'll rip this village to pieces and throw away this worthless husk. The fact that Naruto had escaped her murderous intent still infuriated Anko. To make matters worse, there was no one at headquarters to torture. Rather, she went in search of Kurenai and took some dango. She was proud of the little bastard, but she also enjoyed torturing the child. I'm telling you, Kurenai, if you have an opportunity to get him on your team, you should take it. The kid is going to go places. Kurenai sipped her beverage. He doesn't sound like he would be a promising Genjutsu specialist. True, he'd be stuck with the blunt end of the Genjutsu arts. The term, blunt end, was used to disparagingly describe Genjutsu that did not rely on cunning and stealth. Instead of deceiving the enemy shinobi, it totally overwhelmed the victim's senses, making it obvious that they were using Genjutsu. Although it was still challenging to use, there was no true art involved. It could still be broken in the same manner as other Genjutsu, but it required a significant chakra expenditure. Like other shinobi arts, this one also relied heavily on the user's skill. The Nadime's own Genjutsu, Kokuongyo no Jutsu, Infinite Darkness Technique, was the best illustration of blunt Genjutsu. By pushing that kind of Genjutsu to its absolute limit, the second Hokage had produced a Genjutsu that was almost impossible to defeat. Kurenai tried, but she lacked the ability to duplicate that kind of technique. Both Kunoichi thought it was improbable that Naruto would advance that far in that branch of Genjutsu. She continued, but even so he would enhance any team he is on. I've taught him a lot. He knows how to make and use poisons. He can make antidotes for the most common poisons. Incredible taijutsu for his age. He's a chakra powerhouse with amazing levels of stamina. Naruto is going to be a shinobi for the history books. Kurenai grinned at the pride of her friend. Her friend clearly had feelings for the boy. Anko didn't build relationships with people outside of herself. She would be pleased to have Naruto on her team, and it was nice to see. The Genjutsu mistress, who had passed the Jonin exams herself, was still ecstatic. She would be responsible for 3 academy graduates in just 3 months. Despite the fact that the Genin test was meant to eliminate a lot of candidates, she was determined to ensure that her team passed. She would assist in educating the next generation because this was her passion. However, she would probably have minimal influence over the composition of the team. However, she would express her preference clearly if someone asked her opinion. I'll remember that after the graduation. Anko glanced at her friend's plate after finishing another stick. You going to finish that? Kurenai laughed and shook her head. Although she wasn't a huge fan of dango, they frequently ate there because it was one of the few things that made Anko happy. As her friend ravenously devoured another portion of her favorite dish, she grinned. For Kurama, the last 3 months were a long one. Although he had always found the academy annoying, he was now being held back by it because none of the other students were proving to be a worthy opponent in the spars. Instead of listening to boring lectures, he could have used those 8 hours to continue his training. He made an effort to accomplish something worthwhile because he didn't want to waste any more time. He used a variation of the tree walking exercise but did not engage in any overt chakra control exercises. He increased the size of his muscular system and chakra control by using the floor and the furniture he sat on. He would try to lift his feet after sticking them to the ground, using the same idea as the tree walking exercise. He had to be careful not to damage the floor beneath him, but if one did it for hours on end, it was decent low-key resistance training. The more he flexed his muscles to raise his feet, the more chakra he poured in to make them stick. More significant were the advantages to his chakra control. Lately, Anko had been conducting more thorough training sessions. For as long as he could, he would need to hide in the woods and avoid being caught by her. The roles were reversed, and he would have to look for her while also being alert for the intricate traps she set. He had to quickly employ Dokasei Kiyomeru no Jutsu, poison cleanse technique, multiple times because the majority of her traps were poisoned. Kurama became completely immune to his deadly poison after mastering a few more. Additionally, he was beginning to develop resistance to some of the lesser known Hai no Kuni varieties. It was finally time for the Genin graduation exam, though Kurama could have received a perfect score on the written exam that was the first component. He reasoned that some of the ideas were a little too complex for academy students, which was done on purpose to distinguish between those who were truly brilliant and those who were only skilled at rote memorization. In any case, he chose to pass with an average score rather than demonstrate his superior intelligence. He made an impression on both Iruka and Mizuki during the physical portion. Fighting against the Habi style had frustrated Mizuki in particular. He hadn't even had to fight the obnoxious Chunin with all of his strength or speed. And the jutsu part was just done. At last, he had perfected the bunshin and could create clones with ease. Iruka gave him a grin. Well done, Naruto. You pass with flying colors. Your physical and ninjutsu scores were top-notch and your exam scores were passing. You easily finished in the number 2 spot of the class. Yeah, and soon I'm going to get a sensei who is going to teach me really cool jutsu. Not like the lame ones we have to do at the academy, Kurama said, flashing him the victory sign. Iruka laughed at his enthusiasm. After Tuchi and Ayame died, the boy was a broken shell, but he had changed a lot. He was now a prodigy, second only to the Uchiha, thanks to the lessons he received from Anko. In order to test the upcoming shinobi, he ruffled the boy's hair and sent him off. Hiruzen had a meeting with the class instructors. The composition of the new Genin cells needed to be determined. After reviewing the results, The Hokage realized he now had to make a tough decision about which tradition to uphold. According to one tradition, teams should be balanced, and the Dobi, the dead last of the class, should be paired with the year's top kunoichi and rookie of the year. Sasuke, Sakura, and Shikamaru would be grouped together according to the class rankings. The issue was that this stood in stark contrast to the other custom that the class was supposed to follow. The clan heirs of Akamichi, Yamanaka, and Nara were on his mind. Uruka.san How well do Shikamaru, Shoji and Ino get along? Shoji and Shikamaru get along just fine Hokage. Sama however Ino cares little for either boy. In time she might mature but she has an infatuation with Sasuke. The Sandaime inhaled deeply from his pipe. It was somewhat of a puzzle. Although there was a strong desire to maintain objectivity, he was aware that the majority of genin who graduated would not pass the exam to become fully qualified genin under a jonin instructor. Naruto would be on a team with 2 other civilians if he maintained the Ino Shika Sho combination. However, Naruto would be able to join Team 10 under his son if he adhered to the tradition that united the Sannin. While failing the jonin test did not necessarily mean that a person's career was over, it did set it in a different direction. Many were dissatisfied with the remedial teamwork exercises, and they frequently left or switched to the administrative side of shinobi work. Being the Hokage's secretary or performing any other administrative duties wasn't a disgrace, but it was a waste of potential. Others would eventually be used to fill voids in existing teams from genin who died or suffered injuries that ended their careers. After stating, "I've made my decision. Team 1 will consist of," Hokage proceeded to list each team in order. Sakura, Shikamaru, and Sasuke would make up Team 7. Kiba, Shino, and Hinata's tracking team would be Team 8. Ino, Shoji, and Naruto would make up Team 10. Hi Hokage. Sama shot back Iruka. It would be intriguing to observe the team's development. He would be monitoring the career of young Naruto. Mizuki had not succeeded. He had deceived Noboru into believing that stealing a particular scroll would demonstrate his worthiness of joining Sasuke's team. The little idiot ratted him out after completely failing. Mizuki was the one on the run now. Fortunately for him, he was ready and had prepared for this possibility. He would be a missing nin now, though. Hatred. Snarling, he continued running into the night. Everyone would learn their team assignment on this day. As was to be expected, the day began with Ino and Sakura engaged in a tirade that, for the 100th time, threatened to break the old fox's legendary patience. When Iruka entered and forced them to sit somewhere else, the auditory torture was over. "I have your team assignments. I know all of you will make Konoha proud. Always remember we are all comrades." As Iruka continued to babble about the renowned Will of Fire, Kurama impatiently tapped his foot. At last, he finished, and the names began to be called out. Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Shikamaru Nara will be Team 7. Your sensei will be Kakashi Hitaki. Yes, take that Ino.pig, true love conquers all. HNN. Troublesome. Iruka went on. Team 8 will consist of Kiba Inuzuka, Hinata Hyuga and Shino Aburame. Your sensei will be Kurenai Yuhi. Despite having conflicting feelings for Naruto, Hinata hoped to be assigned to his team in order to resolve their differences. She wasn't let down aside from that. Shino was always courteous and respectful, and Kiba's raucous demeanor was reminiscent of the former Naruto. Team 9 is still an existing genin cell, so we'll move on to Team 10. Iruka's throat cleared. Naruto Uzumaki, Ino Yamanaka and Shoji Akamichi will be in Team 10 with Asuma Sarutobi as your sensei. Kurama could put up with the choice of team. Compared to the other kunoichi in the class, Ino was marginally less useless. Since Kurama wanted to manage the team dynamic, Shoji was sufficiently submissive and would follow the crowd. He was determined not to let either of them slow him down. The first chance would be in the upcoming 4 months, and Chunin exams were held every 6 months. Even though rookie teams didn't often enter, he would drag them to the required level of proficiency. Although the nine-tailed fox didn't know much about Asuma, he was most likely a skilled Sarutobi. Seeing another Jonin in action would be fascinating. Since shinobi were highly specialized, Anko's abilities were most likely distinct from Asuma's. Good luck to all of you, your Jonin commanders will be here soon. Shikamaru closed his eyes and leaned back. He felt annoyed with himself. He had thought that he would be with his friend Shoji if he just passed. It wouldn't have been too horrible, but he would have had to put up with the blonde kunoichi. He was unaware that the dobi of the class would be paired with the best of the class in an attempt to balance the teams. When it was too late to take action, The reasoning was evident after the fact. What a drag, I hope I can take a nap. When Kurama first saw Asuma, he was impressed. Despite the bearded man's laid-back appearance, someone like Kurama could see that he concealed deadly potential. Although appearances could be deceiving, the Biju could quickly determine the man's level of power in the event of a confrontation. In his natural state, he could crush him like a bug, but Anko could defeat him just as easily inside Naruto's body. It was the smoking Jonin who ordered, "Team 10, follow me." The team selections had not pleased Ino. Leading the way, she stalked furiously behind him. They walked to one of the academy training areas nearby, and Shoji munched on a bag of chips. "I'll cut to the chase, kids. You have one more test before you can call yourself Genin." Despite Ino's loud protests, Asuma simply laughed and said, "Don't get mad at me. I don't make the rules. I've just decided to live by them. Well, most of them." "And, what kind of test?" Kurama inquired. He flicked his cigarette away after taking one last drag. "A test to determine if you become my students or if you get sent back to the academy in disgrace. If you manage to beat my little test, I'll get to know you a little better. For now, just meet back here at 9 a.m. Come with all of your shinobi gear." Ino objected. "You never answered what kind of test it was. How are we supposed to prepare?" With a shrug, Asuma said, "I'll see you tomorrow." He then sealed his hand and hurried away using the body flicker technique, also known as Shunshin no Jutsu. Since Kurama wasn't concerned about taking another test, he had time to ask Anko for any final advice. He wanted to know if she had a last jutsu to show him, but she could stuff those words. "I'm going to go train so I can beat Asuma Sensei's test. See you guys later." As Ino stalked off for her own home, Shoji replied with a friendly farewell. Anko wasn't privy to the team selections, so she was very curious what they would end up being. She hoped that her friend Kurenai would have Naruto on her team. On the other side of the coin, that would mean the only two people she gave a damn about could be taken out in a single mission. "I'm not going to think about that." The torture specialist wasn't kept waiting long, and soon she spotted her blonde-headed protege. She launched a few kunai at moderate speeds at him that he easily deflected. "Don't keep me waiting, brat. Who did you get as your sensei?" She watched his expression as he smiled. "It's Asuma, but that isn't the best part. I'm not stuck on a team with Sasuke. Teme." Anko rolled her eyes. She couldn't believe he still cared about the Uchiha. In her eyes, he had surpassed the massacre survivor months ago. On occasion, Naruto would surprise her with his perceptiveness. This was one of those times. "It's not that I'm worried about beating him in a fight, I just don't like him." Anko gave him a grin. "Fair enough. Now who else is on your team?" "A Yamanaka named Ino and an Akamichi named Shoji. Ino's annoying, but Shoji is alright." She frowned at him. "Look, Gaki, do you want to make Chunin as soon as you can?" He nodded. "Then tell me each of their strengths and weaknesses and how you are going to address them." "Does this have anything to do with the Genin test?" Anko shook her head. "Maybe. Each instructor is different, but that's not why I brought it up. The Chunin exams, especially the ones held in Konoha, focus on teamwork. Even if you are ready for the next level, you'll be held back if you have a weak spot on your team." Anko saw the boy sigh in frustration and think about it for a few moments. "All right, let's start with Ino. Her taijutsu is better than most of the other girls, but it's still weak. I don't know much about her clan jutsu, but it is useful in interrogation, and from what I understand, it can be used to take over an opponent's body for a short period of time. Her chakra control is excellent. She was a close second behind Sakura Chan." He squinted. "She's bossy and headstrong and will try to lead the team if no one stops her." "Good, and Shoji?" "His taijutsu potential is good. The few times he has actually gotten upset about something, he strikes swiftly and with superior levels of strength. On the downside, when he isn't angry, he is timid and overly cautious. His ninjutsu involves clan-based attacks that are relatively easy to counter. His chakra control is average and he has superior levels of stamina. He isn't a leader and will follow whoever takes charge." Anko graced her student with a smile. "Good. It is important to be aware of people just as much as you are aware of your surroundings. More than one shinobi has been killed by an enemy in a henge." Naruto looked impatient and Anko suppressed a sigh. The boy was after a jutsu, she should have figured. "Now tell me what you will be doing in order to get your team in shape." "I'll get them to train more and point out their weaknesses." "How will you get them to train more?" By asking them to." Naruto's voice trailed off at end. "If that works, great, but most shinobi are proud. You'll need to dangle an incentive in front of them or get your sensei to push them. I don't know Asuma well, but I do know he is laid back, so he likely won't be the one pushing them." Impatience was clear on Naruto's face. Alright, I get the point, but I can't put a plan together until I get to know them better. Anko debated about holding out on the kid just to frustrate him but decided he had taken enough abuse over the year. Since I can tell you don't care about your sensei's words of wisdom, I'll just go ahead and give you the present now. Kami, the brat is practically drooling. Most don't learn how to use elemental jutsu until they are chunin, but since you were lucky enough to train under the amazing Anko Mitarashi, you're already skilled enough to take on most chunin. The first step to learning elemental jutsu is to figure out your natural affinity. From there I'll give you the corresponding jutsu scroll for your affinity. Anko whipped out a sheet of chakra paper and handed it to Naruto. All you need to do is push some chakra into the paper and we'll see what your natural affinity is. Naruto eagerly took the paper and pushed chakra into it. After a moment Anko said, "Any day now. I'm doing it, did you give me a dud on purpose?" Anko scowled and yanked the paper out of Naruto's hands. It was possible that the specially created chakra paper was a dud, as he called it. She pushed some of her chakra into it and the piece of paper instantly turned to ash. Anko was at a loss. Well, this is unexpected. I've never heard of this before, but it looks like you don't have an affinity for any type of elemental chakra. What does that mean? I don't know, this is a new one for me. Normally everyone has an affinity for one type of chakra. I was going to give you a D-ranked ninjutsu of the type you had an affinity for. Naruto had a panicked expression. Does this mean I'll never be able to do cool ninjutsu? Anko shook her head. No, most jonin end up learning two different types of elemental jutsu. Their second isn't something they start with an affinity for. However, after significant use it ends up being a second affinity. But it probably means it will be harder for you to learn. Naruto kicked the ground. That's so unfair. Fine, can I get all 5 scrolls? No, I'll only give you one. It will also include instructions on how to master the elemental change. You have to learn how to convert the normal chakra you have into the appropriate corresponding type. I won't lie to you, kid, this isn't something you can learn overnight. And you had better not let up on your taijutsu training while you attempt to master it. I promise I won't. Now let me know what jutsu I'm going to get. You're such a kid sometimes. I'm 12, and that headband means you're an adult that can and will kill for the village. Remember, you're a reflection on me now, so if you screw things up and use that excuse you're going to regret it. Naruto put his hands up. Alright, can I please have the jutsu now? Anko didn't bother suppressing her sigh this time. Sure. Here is the scroll on how to transform your chakra into Doden type chakra. I think it will be the most valuable since it's not exactly common in Hai no Kuni. Her student read over the exercises to learn how to change his chakra and then took the second scroll. The scroll outlined Doden. Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu, Earth Release. Headhunter Technique. The D-ranked jutsu used chakra to part the earth and allow him to travel short distances underground in order to pull someone down into the earth. It softened the earth below the opponent as well to allow the burial technique to work. If successful, it would leave only the enemy's head visible and effectively trap all but the strongest shinobi. He looked up. Wow, this is awesome. Thank you, Anko, sensei. Don't mention it. This ends our training together, but if you ever need advice or help, let me know. I wasn't kidding when I said you were a reflection on me. Go out there and impress the hell out of this village so I can show everyone what an awesome sensei I am. Naruto smiled at her and they said goodbye. I'm going to miss the little Gaki. Kurama would also miss Anko. She had been diverting. Seeing her attempt to torment him only for him to seemingly innocently avoid her schemes never stopped being amusing. More importantly, she was competent and had done an excellent job with helping hone his host's body. Not having an elemental affinity was rather disturbing. Every shinobi had one, but he did not. He knew Naruto should have one as well. Did Jinchuriki naturally not have any affinities? Or was he special since whatever animating force had once existed in his host was gone? Being found out was a concern, but it would seem a stretch for them to assume a full possession simply because he didn't display an elemental affinity. In either event, he planned on learning Doden. Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu, Earth Release. Headhunter Technique. As soon as possible. The jutsu seemed incredibly useful and presented a whole new vector of attack. Now it only remained to be seen how quickly he could learn it. Learning how to manipulate the nature of chakra didn't sound easy, but he was confident in his abilities. He was the 9-tailed demon fox, the most powerful of all the Biju. This was just another step on the path. It had been a frustrating night for Kurama. Anko had made it clear it wouldn't be easy, but his attempts to transform his chakra into earth chakra had been slow going. Who was he kidding? It wasn't slow going, it was glacial. The first step was to take a clump of dirt and wad it into a ball and hold it. From there he would attempt to flatten the ball using nothing but chakra. He thought it moved once. He had to put a halt to his efforts and rest Naruto's body, and so he had reluctantly done so for a few hours. Now it was time to pass his genin test. The day still clung to its morning chill, but by noon it would be another warm day in Fire Country. He arrived a bit early and saw Ino and Choji as they came to the meeting point. They exchanged greetings. Choji was amiable as usual and Ino seemed less combative. She did look nervous though. Asuma arrived precisely on time with a cigarette in his mouth. "Well, you kids look anxious. Want to hear about the test?" They did, and Asuma explained. "Unlike others, I prefer to lay my cards on the table. Konoha shinobi tactics are based on the belief that 3 genin can take on a chunin and 3 chunin can take on a jonin. 3 jonin should be able to take on any ranked shinobi in the bingo book." All 3 listened attentively. "You'll have 2 hours to prove to me you can work as a team effectively to take me on. No, I don't expect you to be able to beat me, but you do need to impress me. This is a pass or fail test for everyone. You either all pass or you all fail. I'll give you 10 minutes to strategize and then my timer begins. Oh, and unless you come at me with the intent to kill, you won't be able to succeed." Kurama decided it would be best to mention the lethal poison he had. Asuma. "Sensei, are you sure about that? I have a number of poisons I can use, one of which is lethal." Asuma blinked at him. "Shit kid, what are they teaching you at the academy these days?" "I was taught poison use by a supplemental instructor." Asuma took a drag from his tobacco stick and shrugged. "Normally I'd say bring it on, but since I don't know how proficient you are, I don't want to risk your teammates getting hurt if you miss or they get in your way. Everything else is fine, but no lethal poisons." The Jonin sensei gave an amused look at Ino, who shivered slightly at the casual announcement that Naruto carried lethal poisons on him. She knew from her knowledge of botany how dangerous poison could be, and she had been severely admonished by her father about never attempting to use it without a dedicated instructor overseeing her. "No more questions? Good. I'll be within a 1-mile radius of this point and I'll leave you privacy to strategize." Asuma used Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique, and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. First step was to create some basic traps. Nothing terribly fancy, in fact most of them were designed so that even academy students could detect them. He put a couple of difficult ones in as well, which would require a teammate to untangle the victim. He really should have read the files for everyone. He didn't know much about any of them. He knew generally what an Akamichi and a Yamanaka could do, but had no clue about Naruto. He knew that he was the container of the 9-tailed fox, and that meant the villagers despised him. He also knew that the kid had a reputation for pranks that had ended after the murder of the owners of a ramen stand he had frequented. Learning how to handle lethal poison while still in the academy was impressive but also worrisome. Assuming he passed the team, he would need to find out just how competent he was and if he should even be playing around with that stuff. The bearded Jonin wondered how the team would perform on this test. Unlike others who gave this test, he did like to put his cards on the table. It was ridiculous to put together a test when the test takers didn't know what they needed to do to pass. He remembered when he had been given the bell test and had failed initially because he didn't work with his genin teammates. He had been told to get the bell and he had gotten the damned bell. And dear old dad wasn't very helpful when I complained to him. Now that I think of it, that's probably what led me on the path to leaving Konoha for a while. Needless to say, unlike most who failed the bell test, it didn't have a significant impact on his career as a shinobi. Now as a Jonin instructor, he would make sure not to give others the same old test that was popular 40 years ago. "All right kids, show me what you can do." Kurama took charge. "We'll travel single file 10 feet apart from each other. Watch where I go just in case he put up any traps." Ino had been wary around Naruto ever since that spar where she took the kick to the neck, but her natural assertiveness took over. "Who put you in charge?" Kurama gave her an even look. "I placed higher in the class than either of you. But I placed higher in the written exam portion, which shows that I'm smarter and can make better decisions." Kurama felt an intense desire to rip the annoying girl's head off. He took a deep breath. "I've had more experience in evading capture and in finding people due to my additional training. I know what I am doing. Trust me and we'll pass this test, believe it." Ino looked ready to argue, but the intensity of Naruto's stare made her pause. It warred with the casual sounding "believe it," he tacked on to the end of his response. She swallowed nervously and nodded. "Good. Now when we encounter Asuma, we need to work together since this is all about teamwork. Ino, I want you to provide ranged support with kunai. Choji, I want you to help me fight him in close combat, but I want you to hang back a bit until it looks like we have an opening." "You got it," he said in between a mouthful of chips. "And lose the chips, we need to be as quiet as possible." They wouldn't get the drop on Asuma, however he would probably be unimpressed if they didn't use any stealth at all. Kurama could detect the smell of tobacco coming northeast of their position. It was like a trail he could follow. However, he didn't want to reveal his enhanced senses, so he took them on a northern route slightly away from where Asuma was probably located. The team stayed on the ground with Kurama's sharp senses warily on the lookout for any traps. Ino managed to be stealthy, but Choji made far too much noise. On the list of things to fix before the exams, he took them toward the right and saw the first trap. It was a simple snare. Behind him he heard Ino say, "Naruto, look out." Forcing himself not to snap at her, he turned to face her and put a finger to his lips. Ino glared at him but continued on silently. Kurama navigated past another pair of traps, a tripwire and another snare. He could feel Ino tense up behind him, ready to say something, but she managed to stop herself. Kurama could sense Asuma nearby. He went around a particularly well-hidden trap and signaled his team. He moved forward and tossed a kunai at where he thought Asuma was hiding. Ino followed suit and Asuma sprang out from the bushes, easily deflecting the projectiles. "Not bad, your tracking abilities are top-notch and you avoided my traps. Now let's see how you do in a fight." Asuma really had been impressed by their trap avoidance and tracking skills, but now was the time to test their combat skills. He launched himself at Naruto since he was closest. His punch was avoided when the kid sidestepped and responded with his own kick. Asuma easily blocked the kick and launched another attack. With his free hand he caught a kunai out of the air and casually tossed it back at Ino. He kept the speed of his return throw deliberately slow. He could see Choji circle around to his flank. Decent tactics, nothing fancy but effective. Asuma's thoughts were interrupted as the slippery kid avoided his punches and kicks. He was keeping his speed and strength at Chunin levels and was having a very difficult time landing a blow. Deciding to up his game a bit, he launched a sweeping kick and then used Kawarimi to appear behind Ino. He was surprised when a pair of senbon were racing toward his position just as he arrived. It required a quick sidestep to the left to avoid the needles that dripped with some sort of toxin. That gave the kunoichi enough time to slip out of the way. Naruto was now moving for him at upper genin levels of speed that changed instantly right before impact to chunin levels. Asuma's initial guard position wouldn't be sufficient to block the quick strike, and it was his turn to back up a step. "This is embarrassing. I'm not going to let a bunch of students show me up." Asuma responded by showcasing just why he was a jonin. His counterattack would have left a sizable bruise on Naruto if the boy hadn't impossibly twisted at the waist and allowed the kick to fly over his head. Asuma stopped his momentum and turned his kick into a downward heel strike. Naruto flipped his legs and actually blocked the blow and pushed his leg back. A kunai appeared in Naruto's hands, but first he had to awkwardly dodge a powerful if slow haymaker from the Akamichi. After dodging the kick, he snapped a block that was swift and powerful enough to bruise Naruto's wrist, causing him to grunt in response. Another kunai came streaking in from Ino, which he also deflected with a slap toward Choji, who barely managed to dodge out of the way. Damn, these kids are good. They're going to pass, but let's see what other tricks they have. Asuma jumped backward and in mid-air flipped through the hand seals and used futon. Daitopa, wind release. Great breakthrough. The wind jutsu was designed to blow back his opponents and separate them. He didn't push much chakra into since he didn't want to actually hurt them too badly. That resulted in Choji digging in his heels and not actually being blown back. He's strong, must be some muscle underneath that fat. Ino did get hit by the attack and she slammed into a nearby branch. Naruto, however, used a substitution technique and appeared behind him. Not bad, Naruto, he complimented as he ratcheted up his speed and knocked the boy around a bit. Choji valiantly rushed in to help, but a solid kick to the gut doubled him over. The instant his attention was mildly diverted with the kick, he saw Naruto finishing some hand signs. Asuma didn't freeze despite his absolute shock. Those hand signs were for a dangerous and lethal jutsu that medical nin specialized in. Sure enough, he saw Naruto complete Dokugiri. Poison mist. Using his full speed, he grabbed Choji and dashed out of the purple poison field Naruto had ejected from his mouth. Enough. What were you thinking, Naruto? If he hadn't been quicker, Choji could have died. And the boy was grinning at him. "Oh, my little technique? Don't worry, it isn't lethal, it just causes paralysis." Asuma needed a cigarette. "That little bastard, he scared me on purpose. All right, you've impressed me. Obviously Naruto is the most advanced, however you all followed his lead and you were able to work together and made me actually break a sweat. Congratulations and welcome to Team 10.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.